It's campaign and conquest. Let's play TTRPGs done right. War games and gaming with Storm and Magenta tonight. We got a new system best you'll ever see. A paracosmic convergence of distinct masterpiece. It's got the hit shots and plays every genre so well that you would think it was crafted in the depths of hell. It's campaigns and conquests, the best that there is. War games and gaming with a system that wins. Whether you're a pro or a fighting kid, we've got something better, it's really the shit. Custom worlds, random tables galore, got all the backcomes and so much more. It's campaigns and conquests, the only true way. War games and gaming, all night and all day. It's campaigns and conquests, better subscribe to the show. War games and gaming, and now you know. It's campaigns and conquests, and we're feeling alright. War games and gaming, we're storming the churches tonight.
Hello and welcome, everybody. So glad you could join us tonight. My name is Magenta, and this is Campaigns and Conquest. And we're joined tonight by your host, Storm. Say hi, Storm.
Good evening. How are we doing today?
I'm doing pretty good, except for this sudden frog in my throat. Sorry, I
Mm.
was clear before we launched the show, but anyway, we have an exciting show tonight. We've got tonight's show is all about gold, glory, and grammar, the bizarre world of AD&D experience and treasure systems. So, yeah, interesting title, Storm. Can you tell us why you chose that one?
Okay, so this kind of starts with Elmo, our buddy who runs Twitter, has came out and said, you have to be more positive.
Elmo
Because,
said this?
yeah, Elmo said that. I call him Elmo
El-
now. And
oh,
yeah,
okay. I understand who you mean now.
right. So,
I've been
and,
calling him Ellen, but that's just me.
but people, people said, and it's not necessarily a good thing, but true and good don't always, and that negativity or at least contention tends to drive things at a lot of social media, and that people who analyze what they can of the algorithm says, this thing thrives on discontent and clashes. No matter how much people go, well, I just wish it would be nicer. Social media is so toxic and all that. So I said, what the hell? I'm going to just bat a hornet's nest and see if what happens if I go negative. Now, I wasn't really very negative. I brought up something that I brought up before. Everybody jokes about TTRPG and the cyclical nature of all these subjects. So this is nothing new or something like that. But as usual, it got visceral, terse. There was one reply that was, there's always one, but mostly people kept it somewhat, level without being completely. But so I just thought, well, let's take it to the big show, and before I find out that everybody's right and the new algorithm will do worse things to me than it already has, as far as, although I didn't think I was being negative, but that negative anyway. So nice.
Oh, it's a new algorithm, eh?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
that's one of the things. He didn't like what happened
Sure.
in some conversations that don't have anything to do with gameplay, and so he went and brought out this thing saying, well, it's gonna, something about some sort of minutes and all that. So I just thought, you know what, let's see what happens. My account tends to get stagnant, and I was a little bit unhappy with it. So this isn't, I'm making, I didn't decide, well, I'll just start trolling. I do want to talk about this, but it always generates some very aggravated replies and aggravated people. And so, but there's a method to the madness. It's not just about tweaking noses or trying to flip off the Elmo machine or whatever. Although there's some of that too. So,
Okay.
mhm.
Well, yeah, you've always been what's the word I'm looking for? You don't like the whole authority game, where top down, we're all going to do the same kind of things. So I can see that, and an independent thinker is what I would refer to you as. So,
Well, I just,
um,
don't tell me what to do. Basically, I don't like,
right.
so, and the guy was, I don't want to make it a political thing because I know it becomes a political thing with a lot of people and all that. But the thing is that I bought a product and the product was advertised as something. Now the product is something completely different.
Right.
And so, you know, um,
I ran away from that product as quickly as I possibly could.
yeah, a
My
lot of
little
people,
teeny
right,
virtual feet went elsewhere. But
right.
we won't harp on that because that is not what the show is about. The
That's
show
just
is
kind of the
about
backstories.
gaming. That's
Right,
just one of the
right.
tools that we use. But I
Mhm.
am curious though, because gold, glory, and grammar, that's an
So
odd
what?
combination. Where's
Yeah.
that come from?
Well, it's most of these cyclical arguments have a backstory, and they have a history because they are cyclical and they get talked on so much. Now you have some people that think this is some sort of sacred cow treated as such. They get very antagonistic if you challenge it. Um,
Are they dragons?
no, no, but
Oh,
they sometimes they breathe fire like it. They get a little bit out of
okay.
sorts. Yeah. So
I opened the door for that one, didn't I? That was not intentional. It's not pre-rehearsed or anything, just so y'all know.
so one of the things that you have is you have the problems you have is people, a lot of people and a lot of subjects these days and for a long period of time have really focused on credentialism, that because you did this or because you have this accolade or this label, that you are an expert and your expert opinion cannot be challenged by somebody that doesn't have your credential badge or piece of paper, PhD, BHS, whatever it is. And so it's kind of it's a logical fallacy that kind of fits under argument of authority. And because Gary said it's infallible, unquestionable, and absolute word of law no matter what. And that's not true. So in the past, I told a little story about the very, very small altercations make them sound negative, but interactions I had with Gary, which were just surface level yet fun, where I did bring some of this up to him, and he responded at a voice level that was a lot louder than I expected. And that doesn't mean he was yelling at me, but what happened is it was a how do you put it? He was talking to a group of people, but the arrangement of it, like when you expect to see
Oh,
a
you have
talk.
to project.
Well, what it was is it was in a very crowded area where
Right.
there's a lot of people walking around and so forth. And it wasn't where you were sitting in front of a pulpit or anything like that, or you were sitting down. It was just a bunch of people standing in a gaggle. So I didn't think it was formal, and I didn't think he was addressing everybody at the time. I figured it's Gary, everybody's, hey, will you sign my thing and all that kind of stuff. And it was just a gaggle of people approaching him individually. I didn't realize he was actually addressing this crowd in a kind of uh, talk. So I approached him in the middle of this talk. I didn't mean to interrupt. I didn't realize. And I asked him the question, and he then projected the question to the rest of the crowd. And all of
Ah.
a sudden I went from, hey, I've got a quick aside where I can ask this guy some questions, to I'm on the stage. I mean, it wasn't a stage literally, but I'm on the stage with all these people. So it didn't. But I've never been a fan of what it was. Is I says, you're well, I'll just read it. I guess the best thing to do is just read it. It's this note and the psychology and thought process that goes around notes like this. So this is in regards to gold pieces, experience value of treasure taken, and convertible. I don't have to tell you the whole thing, but basically it's saying that you should give XP for every piece of gold that you get in an encounter, and I don't like that. And then, so when you say you don't like it, everybody taps the same sign, and the sign is infuriating, and I hate it. And the sign is players who balk at equating gold pieces to experience points should be gently but firmly reminded, waggle your fingers. That first of all, that seems condescending in of itself, and I don't like that. Reminded that a certain compromises must be made. Thanks, Don Featherstone. I've heard this 1,000 times already. By the time this came out in 78 or 79 or whatever, it was already starting to get a little repetitive and obnoxious to hear that about everything anyway, at least in literature. Unfortunately, it didn't become less of a thing. Now it's something people say about damn near everything, and it drives me insane. So while it's more, and then they put realistic in quotes, which is something that absolutely infuriates me to the no end, because it again seems like it's condescending, and it's not really all that accurate.
Hi,
But
welcome, Latveria.
but then he goes on to explain some things, a list of things for different classes that apparently, if you don't want gold for XP, you must want to do these list of things. And that's a straw man argument, because nobody said that. It's just this thing that comes up. And then it ends with, well, doing some of this stuff would be boring. Well, that's a subjective opinion. I'm here to learn clear cut, black and white instructions to play a game, not be lectured or hero pining or read opining in between the sentences of the instruction. So I don't have anything but derision for that note in that page, and everybody clings to it like a golden calf when you bring this stuff up, and they get real visceral and terse with you about it.
Well, let me step in here if you don't mind, because as a new player, I have some questions about, and this, I may not be interpreting it right. I may be jumping to conclusions that are wrong. So you can correct me if that's the case. But it seems to me that gold is a measure of just how wealthy you become, not necessarily the experience, because, well, say two scenarios come to mind. You go into a cave that's lightly defended because it's an ancient cave that hardly anybody knows about, or all the defenders have died long ago, and you just happen to wander, like you've come upon Blackbeard's treasure, and the only real defense it has is that it's rumored to be cursed. But if you don't believe in curses, you could just take it,
Right.
and then you could take a lot of experience points for that, but you never even fired a single arrow or struck a single thing with the sword, unless
Exactly.
maybe it was the box of treasure in the sand when you finally
Right.
got to it and you wanted to confirm it was really a box, a
Mm-hmm.
treasure chest. So in that particular case, you'd be getting a lot of experience for doing virtual for a cakewalk. But and then conversely, you could save an entire village of really poor refugee people who have been displaced from their home, and you could
Mm-hmm.
fight your butt off.
Mm-hmm.
Take heavy losses,
Mm-hmm.
have to use a lot of your resources, like healing potions and whatever else, expend a lot of bows, expend a lot of arrows and stuff,
Right.
and you get nothing for it, because the people are like, "Oh, you have our gratitude and we will write songs about you. Our children will know your names." And that's all
Mm-hmm.
you get, and you
Mm-hmm.
get no experience, even though you really maybe progressed in your fighting skills quite a bit, because you had to be strategic, you had to be, all of those things. So I'm not sure I mean I get that people are looking for a way to calculate without like having to mark down every action every player took in every single battle, and keep track of things that way. I guess maybe if you're the DM, that could get a little. I mean, you could end up making a lot of hash marks somewhere on a chart somewhere to keep track of that. But um, I just don't see how money necessarily equates to success, in spite of what everything in our world currently teaches us. But apart from that, in a D&D context, I mean, I don't see how it equates.
Well,
Am I
right. It's
wrong
just
or
no, and that's it. And there's a couple of counter arguments that you get. And one is, well, it incentivizes players to do stuff, which boggles my mind. And I said, well, the game, the game.
wait? Why? Hold on.
Mm,
Why do you have to incentivize them other than,
exactly,
I mean, if
exactly.
you didn't have the incentive to battle, you wouldn't be playing a game that
Right,
focuses so much on.
right. It's a
Right.
game,
Okay.
especially AD&D, where there's an appendix in the game called Appendix N that talks about some of the fiction that was inspiration, some of the fiction that is meant to be simulated by the game, at least initially, at least by the people who play tested and developed it.
Mhm.
And all of that is, well, at least the majority of it, you could probably put down as heroic fantasy.
Right.
Well, selflessness and money grubbing are kind of antithetical.
Well,
So
yeah, no, I mean, a paladin is not a mercenary typically.
right, right, right. So I don't really see that. Now the other one is, well, it's just and here's another word that makes me cringe and grit my teeth, is it's an abstraction. Oh, it's an abstraction, in that the acquisition of the gold is just fast forwarding past the note that I read that's supposedly super boring, that has a list of things that nobody ever really said they wanted to do in order to simulate what we're talking about. That straw man. So it just fast forwards the quote boring parts. Okay. Um, so basically, what the note is it's like, well, that's a Rocky montage of boring stuff that nobody wants to watch. So we'll just skip the montage, say you spent the money, and be done with it. Okay. Well, and
Well, hold on. Let me clarify something here. So when you say it's like a Rocky montage, do you have to, like, if you do a thing where you train to get skills or you spend time otherwise attaining skills by experience on the battlefield, on the missions, on the sparring with the other members of your team, and whatever, uh, to hone your skills, do you have to roll dice through that? Is that the only way to do it, or don't you typically just, because granted, my play experience is kind of limited, but um, it was more along the lines when I did play of, like, you would say, okay, we're going to camp for the night. While we're at camp, my druid is going to learn a couple spells or whatever,
right. Well, that's the thing. I
or
mean,
gonna. Okay.
let's go through the whole thing. So
Okay.
the list is this. Uh, while it is more quote the quotes for for clerics to study holy writings. You mean when they grab a scroll, open them up, and try to read them? And yes, that's an abstraction comparative to sitting in some basement of a monastery and translating stuff with a quill and pen or something. Sure. But nonetheless, you still are holy writings or things like that occur in the game all the time. So I'm kind of confused as why that is on the list. Another one is pray. Well, pray. I've had players ask me, "Hey, I'm going to pray to my God. What happens? Do I get anything out of it?" That happened 3 times in one session with OD&D. You were there.
Yeah. Yeah.
They right. So okay. Now chant. Well, that's just being a smart aleck, in my opinion. But okay. Practice self-discipline. Now I don't know if he was talking about some of the practices like you see where certain denominations whip themselves if they believe that they're. But for me, a example of practicing self-discipline in the game would be you're a cleric of some sort, and you're supposed to be celibate or whatever. You go into a bar with the rest of your party, and Miss Hottie Pants is up there, doing the belly dance for the entertainment, and you you keep yourself from indulging in lust or whatever. I mean, I'm Catholic, so I'm going with those sins because I'm not. But
Well, that would be
not
easy
making
for
a
me.
religious form, right? It would be easy for you, but you understand what I'm saying. There's if to play a character who has a moral code and to make sure that you stay within that moral code or whatever code it is. That's a matter of self discipline. You as a
Now,
player, if you have full
if it was
agency,
dancing donuts, though, I
right,
might have some trouble.
if you
But
have
you're right, resisting your natural urges or
right, it's
resisting
just a
what is
matter of role
considered
playing. That's not a big deal, and I don't. So anyway, so
right.
it would make a playable game. Now there's another phrase that makes me spin up, and people are going to go, well, sounds like a lot of things spin you up. Well, maybe they do, but here's the thing: no game is not playable. You may not want to play it, but the game is still playable. So that's always been this kind of BS in people have. Well, that game's so horrible. It's so difficult. It's unplayable. Not true. You may not have the time to play it. That doesn't mean somebody else doesn't. You may not want to play it. You may not be able to,
So
go
what
through
if
those.
instead of gold,
Wait,
you
let me.
go in? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
You're jumping around. So
Oh, sorry.
anyway, so the rest of it was uh, fighters should be exercising various sorts uh, to gain real expertise or experience. Tilting the lists, engaging in weapons practice,
What does
lighting.
okay? Um, so we're not gatekeeping for newbies out there. What does tilting the list mean?
It's kind of like going through the easiest and quickest way to get past that is just imagine a kind of obstacle course that you would see in the army, similar, not exact, but close enough. That's all that means.
Oh
And
yeah, one of those courses where they got to stomp through the tires and then climb up the rope and then swing
yeah,
across the swamp and crawl on their bellies under.
right,
Yeah,
that
okay,
kind of
gotcha.
stuff. That's
Mhm.
that's not exact enough, but it's close enough. And anyway, the point is all these lists are invocations of things that at some point seem purposely made to be too extreme or silly, and it just seems to be mocking some other people's attitudes and preferences instead of telling you how to play the game. So I really, really don't like it at all. But there's a lot of them
Wouldn't
in here.
another? Oh, and I'm sorry to, but another example would be Luke Skywalker doing the practice with the ball and
Well,
uh,
it's not
the helmet on. I mean
close
that's
enough.
him
Close
learning
enough.
his skill, right?
Well, yeah, and then they're like, well, "That's boring" or whatever. Well, okay, first of all, um, I didn't find the movie boring, and that scene had something to it. When I brought you all into the city, or you brought yourselves into the city and said, "Hey, if you want to level up, you're going to have to go get some training," that became a role playing. I don't want to just play. I kill stuff, I get gold, and I go back and kill stuff. If I wanted to do that, I'd go play. World of Warcraft or something. So there's going to be some role playing involved, and you can make something out of the ones that aren't extreme or silly in this little editorial that he wrote can be done if you desire. I'm not saying that you have to do this. I'm simply saying that it as an excuse to use you're getting rich so you're getting better. It doesn't make conceptual sense. And people say, "Oh, yes, it is. You're just paying for the training. It's just not talking about training. It's just paying for it." Well, no. If you want to get better at bowling, it's not about the money you pay to use the lane, the money you pay to have the ball. It's
Right.
practicing and using the right form to get it done. And you can pay a lot of money for a lot of things and get nothing out of it. You can have a gym membership and you can pay monthly, but unless you go in there and put in the work and lift the weights, it doesn't matter that you're paying for it.
Well,
So
here's the other question I have about that, and this, okay, again, I might be naive, so correct me if I'm wrong, or I'm sure somebody can put it in comments if they disagree. Um, does it really take any more time to say I'm going to spend my evenings sparring with the other fighter in my group to hone my skills than it does to say I'm going to spend 3 gold pieces on learning the fighting skill? I
What?
mean, isn't that ultimately all you're doing? So, say you are having a Rocky montage type of tilting at the lists experience is a way to gain experience. Um, does it take longer to say, I'm going to spend the evening after our travel when we're bedded down in camp, you know, practicing my sword skills with the other another member of the group or on a tree, whatever. If I just say, "Hey, dungeon master, I'm doing this with my time off this evening before I turn in for bed." Is that any longer to say than to say, "Hey, dungeon master, I want to spend 3 gold pieces on increasing my character's ability with the sword?" It doesn't it ultimately take the same amount of time to say one versus the other? Why is it why is one onerous and one is just ordinary? I don't understand that.
I don't. I'm not sure either. The thing is that in the rules, the weirdest part about this is that in the rules on the next page there is an explanation of receiving training in order to elevate yourself to the next level. So there's a lot of contradiction in this, and people tend to focus on the page prior, um, on the page we were talking about, but they don't look at it when the next page comes up, and it does exactly what, as far as I see it, the little note is chiding. So the thing is a mess as far as layout. It contradicts itself on more than one occasion, this being one of the stronger ones. It's worded in such a way that a lot of it sounds like suggestion. A lot of people argued with me till the day is long about that in a very terse and non-friendly manner, I might add. But um, it says how treasure is divided is the realm of player decision. Experience point for slaying monsters, however, is strictly your prerogative. And he's speaking to the DM, or he or she is the DM. It is suggested that you decide division of XP as follows. So the paragraph prior to it is very solid in that it's telling you how and what to do. And it's very mathematically orientated, at least as far as tolerance for math goes these days. It's very heavily mathematical orientated. The page before. Then the page we're talking about, the first thing comes up, and it's, uh, you know, so it just contradicts itself. But all I do, and the way I use this thing is, first of all, the money doesn't have anything to do with it. Money is a value within the game. It buys you gear. It buys you
Excuse me.
hirelings. It gets things done within the game. You have expenses, you have taxes, and things like that acquiring money pays for. But it doesn't have anything to do with experience. You get experience by doing things in the game. You get experience by, and fun. The thing that's most confusing is that everywhere outside of discussion that we're talking about, there is places in AD&D and from Gary that says, well, I really like to see people solve problems. I like them to use their skills in ingenious ways and role play well. And I give experience for doing that. Yeah. And I'm all for that. What I'm not for is people turning the game into, let's find a sneaky way to haul bags of gold out of a place and then call that learning how to swing a sword better or learning more spells or being able to turn more undead than I did 5 minutes ago before I grabbed these 2 giant sacks of gold. Tying a metric that has to do with the stats of your player with an in-game currency is the worst idea I've ever heard. I just, how that plays out is awful. And on top of it, to be chided like you're asking for some intensely complex thing by separating the two is kind of disingenuous. And that's why I was kind of offended by it. And people think that, they can make fun of me for saying that, like I'm, a sissy or whatever, but it really bugged me. But you get gold. I mean, you can be a character that's neutral, and you may be that person like Daffy Duck that gets all whacked out about making a fortune. But like you said earlier, Magenta, you might be that paladin that's all about just being a selfless, hero for the less fortunate or downtrodden, or the glory of your empire, or whatever it may be. There's all sorts of different paths to take. But if the
Right.
only way
You
you're
may
going to
be
get better in the game is to acquire gold, then the game is about acquiring gold and not those things. That's
right.
my problem with it.
Because I could just imagine, like, I actually just played in another game, because we've been trying out Baldur's Gate 3, and there was an instance where you save this group of people, and they don't have a lot of money. They're basically refugees, and it gives you an option that you can refuse their money, and and if you're like a paladin, or you're if your motivation in the game as you're role playing is to be the hero, can you really take the money from these people who don't have enough to feed themselves and still feel like a hero? And it gives you options. I mean, one of the options in the game is to, ask for money every time you do something. But, to me, then you're a mercenary and not a hero. And I don't know that being a mercenary makes you a better fighter necessarily. I mean, it
Right.
might make you a richer fighter. You might have, maybe you get better equipment. I could see that as being, that money might equate to better equipment. Maybe if you're an archer, you can afford to get more bows or better bows. But, other than that, it doesn't make your aim any better if you have more money.
Right. Right. It's
Well,
just it,
unless you get glasses or something, but that's not really part of the deal in most of these games.
right. The core problem here is money doesn't equal heroism, and you're playing a game that predominantly people associate with heroic fantasy. So it's a bizarre idea that hauling treasure out of a dungeon somehow translates directly into becoming a better swordsman or spellcaster. Does carrying a bag of gold up some stairs really make you better? No. It's a thematic disconnect to do this. It changes the game fundamentally to just being some mercenary Daffy Duck, Scrooge McDuck person that's all about diving into big piles of gold because that's going to get you ahead in life. So, and you bring this up, and people get extreme. Not everybody, but some people get very emotional about it. And I think there's a fanboy element. There's a lot of ego in gaming in general, but I think that beyond being, kind of saucy to people that frankly sometimes were saucy at me first, I hope to sound not too childish, but
He
uh,
started it.
I know it's getting a little bit, but Jesus, um, it being a purist about rules that are disjointed and have literally had decades of these kinds of disagreements. Now, you may be insistent that you haven't because everybody but it really does. A lot of this stuff is this way. Clunky writing has led to these misinterpretations, people making house rules, heated table debates, constant conversation. Like I said in the beginning of the show, there's some of these things just go round and round and round because they never really get solved. And part of that is preference. It's brand loyalty, but a lot of it is, for some reason, in the 70s and 80s, editing was almost non-existent. So some people are so the other part of this is you have a group of people that identify themselves as BROSR. And I don't even remember if that's an acronym or what. I don't care, whatever. They're not, this is one thing where people as a whole they're like France. If you're French, it's just a joke. Don't write me letters. But there's always been this joke between the British and the Americans and some of the Europeans that no matter what we disagree on, we can all find common ground in not liking the French. Well, when it comes to all these different
Oh,
people,
that's
yeah,
not true of me. I took French in school, and I love
sure,
France, but
I know.
okay.
But it's just a joke. But the point is that these people never really make any friends, and they seem to pride themselves in it. And they have this fanatical idea that if you don't play with every rule written in this book, that you're not doing it correctly. But when you read through this book, it's, and the other disconnect or contradiction is that there's people that will reference a flow chart for combat that's 8 pages long. Remember, I showed you that flow chart?
Yes, I was most confused by that, and I'm like, at one point I thought maybe I'll try my hand at DMing, and then you showed me that chart, and I was like, no, hell no,
The
never.
same, some of the same people that says yes, it looks like a lot, but you'll get used to it, and it's not that bad once you learn how to do it. Are the same people that say that if you consider a hunting trip for a fighter in the wilderness during this game, it's become a clunky, unplayable mess.
Right.
What?
Well, you know what? I have some armchair psychology that I just made up myself, which don't judge. But it's true. I did make it up myself, but it seems logical to me that people become comfortable with what they know, and when you try to change something, that it's kind of like, why do we do some of the things culturally that we have done since like the Middle Ages, and we continue to hang on to them even though they're maladaptive to a modern society? Because it's tradition. And when you start messing with some of those traditions, people get very unsettled. It feels like their world is changing. It feels like you're yanking the solidity right out of the earth, and it's going to be mass earthquakes and chaos and death and destruction. And I think that that is just human nature sometimes, to fear change, even if it's change for the better. It doesn't matter because, well, okay, change means I have to unlearn the old way and then learn the new way. And I was intelligent and smart. I spent years learning the old way. Now I'm going to be all like confused and unsure and going back to the beginning again. And nobody likes that feeling. That's my theory.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's why people will hang on to an old bad system even when it no longer serves.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's a lot of people that just find it correct. One of the other discussions about this that wasn't so filled with contention and vitriol was that some people on an old famous forum back when forums were around, and God, I wish they would come back. There's so much. I mean, can you get flame wars on a forum? Oh yeah, but they're a lot better than social media because you don't have an algorithm. You're there for a reason. But anyway, beyond that, I also have some forums. If you want to join them, if you agree with me, please contact me and I'll give you a registration. You can get on there and you can talk on those. They're a lot better. But an old forum was that doing this way that people think is the right way or the actual rule. I don't even see it as a rule. The way the wording is, to me, it sounds like a suggestion.
Yeah.
Yeah. But either way, there's other ways to do it. And it's been interpreted by many as a way where you level too fast. Now, the counter argument by Sandy Peterson was, he says, I think it's too hard. And
well, yeah,
okay,
because don't
but
you have to like convert some things? Like, so say you go in and you loot a place and it's not full of actual gold, but it's full of things that you could sell for gold. Then you have to take the step to actually gather up the treasure that you found, and then you got to go and fence it somewhere. I don't know how you would do that, or you have to have a separate chart to determine how much is that old broken lyre worth. I mean, it's in okay condition. How do we rank it? Do you have to go through all of the minutia of figuring out what the worth of that is in gold, and then adding all of the individual things that you found and converting them over to gold? Or I don't know, how does that work?
yeah, you take the stuff to something like a village or a city where there might be somebody that can appraise it, and you get an appraisal for it, and then you take that appraisal, and so it's going to be appraised in its gold piece worth. Then when you've got that appraisal, or you fence the stuff or whatever, so that you've got nothing but gold, now you can judge how much XP you get out of having that gold.
Huh. That's odd.
It's
So,
a
I
lot of
mean,
math.
meanwhile, you could have just added up like how many times you successfully survived an attack or had an encounter in the battle. I fired 6 arrows, which you got to count anyway because you got to replace those arrows when you go back
Well,
to town. You got to.
some people say that's makes the game unplayable and bogs it down and all that. Like I say, a lot of these, the weirdest thing about these conversations is the contradiction. You fill out a detailed 8.5 by 11 form to start the game up, but if you want to count backwards from 20 during the game, that's too much. What?
Well,
Okay,
wouldn't you just count forward and subtract? I mean, is
well,
that
you could do
well?
that too. But in either way,
Yeah, I
1 to
fired 10
20 is too
arrows. Now I
much.
have 10 left. I don't
Yeah,
know.
that's
But
too much.
here, if you don't do those things though,
Okay,
then how much value does it have if you like come across some treasure that's like um a quiver of never-ending arrows, for instance? Well, it's worthless if you weren't counting arrows anyway. Am I?
right.
Yeah.
That's true. I don't know if that's a magic item or somebody made it, but you got a good point. But
Well,
right.
somebody should make it because that
Hmm.
should totally exist, and it should be a whole quest to get it because that would be
Right.
really cool.
Right.
And I could see that being something, but that wouldn't level up your character. That would just give you additional abilities because of your weapon,
Yes. Right. Exactly. The
which I
idea.
think that's appropriate. That makes sense to me. Because yeah, I busted my ass and I fought against this well-renowned archer. He was the Robin Hood of his day, except he was the Dark Robin Hood or whatever. And I took him out, whatever. And now I got his quiver of never-ending arrows with,
Right.
you know,
So the bottom line for me is that there are reasons, and there are where you may be fighting something where there. Are you okay?
oh, sorry. It's my cat is distracting me. I apologize, everyone.
I heard
Go
that
ahead.
twice, and I wasn't sure what was going on. Maybe I thought you were developing a nervous tick or had too much caffeine. I didn't know you were talking to your cat. Sorry. Anyway, um, but no, it's just separating. It's just, to me, it has to be separate. The idea of conflating the two or equating the two, just, you get experience by doing. You get money as a reward for accomplishing missions. If you may not get anything in a fight, like you said, so the whole thing just doesn't make any sense. What I do with paracosmic convergence is it's real simple. You simply, if you, I mean, tally marks are about as, that's cave painting. If you can't do a tally mark, you got other problems. But
If you
so,
can't do a tally mark, buy an abacus. They're awesome.
right, we talked about that last time. Buy
I'm
an
a big,
abacus,
I love abacuses.
but
Is that
you just,
right? Is abaci? I don't know.
I don't know if that's a plural or not, well, but yeah, I mean, that's all you're doing is you're marking what you've done throughout the session, and that will give you, and the accomplishments. It's not just that. I mean, you get something for killing something, but experience comes from learning, surviving an encounter. You've
Right.
got some sort of practical experience for defeating that monster or that enemy, whatever it is,
Or
and
if you go to the local village and you participate in their annual village fair and you compete against, their local fighters or wrestlers or boxers or whatever, maybe you could get some points from a contest, mano a mano kind of thing.
sure, yeah, I mean, whatever your imagination gives you, but painting yourself in a corner where you have, I mean, and people say, well, you doesn't mean that just because you have money, it doesn't matter if there might not be money, but if there is money, you get XP for the money. I can't get along with that. But I like to have it where your actions, your accomplishments, and even to a degree, your mistakes, um, can give you some benefit in learning and growing and becoming better. Um, uh, um, So that's a, I guess, the cat thing kind of threw me off balance. Go ahead.
Sorry about that. I apologize. I'm just trying to get her attention to keep her from jumping on top of a box that's going to dump her on the floor and make a big mess. Sorry about that. Um, but in that mood. You know, the cats get like where they get the zoomies. She keeps trying to get into stuff she's not supposed to. And like that's my headphone cord. She's really in that
Okay.
way, that kind
Um,
of a mood. Sorry about that, folks. No,
uh,
that's not for you.
anyway, but
Sorry.
it's just
Sorry.
it's this um, mathematical conundrum where at one point they have you figuring out ratios and converting them to percentages, which isn't terribly difficult math, but most people, if you present that in a game today, they would balk at it and call it complexity in one paragraph. And the next paragraph is, do it any way you want.
Mhm.
Here's a suggestion, but ultimately do it any way you want. And then the next paragraph is this extremely restrictive arm bar that you have to use this system. Well, anyway, I don't, my position has changed because people were so adamant about this. I always said that I understand the idea of rules as written in that you should be able to play the game and understand the, and apparently there are people who say, well, you didn't understand the rules. Well, maybe not, but I interpret that as a suggestion, one that I was going to flatly disregard, especially giving the tone of it. But in that you were supposed to understand rules as written before you change them. But if that's a rule, because the argument that I had on Twitter was, is that a suggestion or a rule? If it's a rule, I got nothing for this game. And I'm glad I misinterpreted it because playing it what they call the right way would make it extremely, I would have walked away from it 40 years ago.
Right.
And so hell with that.
Well, here's something that I don't understand. I mean, I'm not one to say with certainty that math destroys a game. You've got to represent. I mean, there's a little bit of math, even if it's just subtracting from your hit points and what your character has. You know, you're at full strength. You got hit. Now you're five less than what you had before because you took that much damage. Um, that kind of thing is a necessity, these types of games, because how else do you represent the changes that are happening, so that you know what happens the next round? But if you're just making extra math work for yourself in the game, then that doesn't make any sense to me.
Now,
If you could say you gained, 5 experience points because you participated in a competition in the local, um, or you got in a bar fight. You went to a town and you got in a bar fight and you kicked everybody's butt in the bar, so you get extra XP for your fighter because you were really badass in that bar fight, that should be fine. You shouldn't have to, I mean, even if you didn't walk away with any money, you still fought and you won.
well, like, yeah, right. It's just, it's not really the math. I have a higher tolerance for math than most people, but in these games,
Well,
because
it's
the
not the math
tolerance for people,
for me either. It's the
uh,
that it's unnecessary
yeah,
in this
well,
case. You could account for experience in a different way
it's
other
not,
than converting the priceless vase into gold at a going to a shop and
well,
taking it to a fence and then
you have to,
determining how much gold it is for each item that you take and treasure.
you have to do that anyway.
Oh,
So that really isn't the issue here. The issue here is
okay.
is that acquiring wealth directly translates to becoming a better adventurer, to having more hit points, to being able to hit harder, to be able to invoke better spells and all that. And that's ridiculous. And that,
Wow. Then
uh,
Angel would have failed at this game, like from Buffy and Angel in the
huh?
series, where he's taking on clients who were poor and couldn't pay, and doing
Oh
it
yeah,
just because he was
right,
heroic.
right. The heroes aren't
He
about
would
money.
have never advanced in any experience.
Just like any other system, death and taxes, baby. You've got to. There's reasons why you need money. and there may be good rewards for doing what you're doing, that even if you're a hero. One of the things that they do with paladins or clerics in cases is that they have to give a percentage of what they find to the poor. They go and distribute it. It's one of the costs of the class, is that you've got to go give it to the poor. And
Oh, well, that's good.
yeah, there's all sorts of ways in AD&D that they restrict leveling up, and they restrict the amount of money that you can get. And all the people that say that their rules is written, I don't know if they are or not, because I don't see them play. But I think there's a lot of people that, because they hurl complexity and all those cliches that I despise so much at everything, that they probably go, well, I don't care about encumbrance. Okay, well, now you can carry semi-loads of stuff out. Well, I don't care. Well, then some people say, well, I only have so much time. Well, do you? Because you won't track time either.
Right.
So what's really stopping you, other than the DM going, okay, well, that, just making something up? But if it's just the DM making something up so that you can maintain simplicity and keep the game going, then really you're at the whim of the DM. And in a way, you're being railroaded, because if he's going to go, okay, well, that's enough. Well, it's just this much you can get, or whatever. It's an arbitrary number made up by them. Or are you using the charts that come with the thing? And if you are, they don't really work unless they work into, this is the rules is written, argument, that you can't use pieces because the pieces are meant to be interlocking. And to a degree, I believe that, until we hit gold for XP, because that's a bunch of shit. And it turns everything into I want to go after nothing but money, no matter what. Now we're all thieves. We're all just
mercenaries.
thieves. Yeah, well, they say, well, it's neat because it'll make you think about something other than combat. Okay, well, if you're sneaking into a dungeon to steal the money out from under the monster, because that's good thinking and good role playing and good adventuring, you're all being thieves. That's what a thief does.
Right. No wonder the monsters are killing people. People keep coming in and stealing their stuff.
Right. So it changes the motivation.
I mean, obviously, they have other reasons for killing, but still.
But and somebody says, well, it incentivizes going and doing the mission again.
Well, couldn't you get an incentive if say the monster was the witch from Hansel and Gretel?
Yeah.
Do you really need a money reward to go after her?
Right. Yeah.
Isn't her candy house enough? But no, I mean, I'm kidding.
Right. The whole thing, it blows the whole thing up. And so, but there's a lot of people that that's what they want. They want Diablo on paper. And if you're not familiar with Diablo, it's a PC game where you just go into dungeons and kill stuff and all that. And it's really just a first person shooter, an MMO on paper. And everybody goes, there's also this thing where people get real mad. Well, if you're telling me how to play, you're violating my rights or whatever. I'm not telling you how to play. I'm simply, you just don't like the way I'm characterizing it. But if you have the game originally, the AD&D game, you could only carry so much stuff, because
which makes sense. That's
realistic. Because as much as people use realism and simulation as a pejorative, you're in a simulated world as a simulated person doing simulated things. And in that world, you have physics. If you throw up a gold coin in the air, your DM's going to tell you it comes back down, largely, unless it's some magic thing or whatever. But you still have rocks. You still have, friction. If you fire the reason you have a range on your bow, whether it's explicitly stated or not, no matter how many times you invoke words like abstraction and simplicity, the range of a bow is about the pull of gravity and air friction. You have physics, and physics include, I can't lift a 2-ton car by myself. So you should have some limit as to what you can carry. Now there's time. If you have time, it makes it more dramatic. The race against the clock is a dramatic trope that's used in a lot of different ways. If you're going into a dungeon, even if there is if you go into a layer, and I've done this before on one of these videos, percent chance in layer. That's something you see in Monster Manual. You go into their layer and they're not there. Where are they? When are they coming back? 2 seconds from now, 2 hours from now. It might make a difference. Now, most people say all you got to do, well, the DM can just make it up. It's too difficult and you're getting into the weeds and you're making things too fiddly. If you track that, you just make it up. Okay, you can do that. But are you one of those people that are out there railing against being railroaded? Because if they're just making it up, it's the same thing as a railroad. They've determined that this is going to be the way things are based off of their imagination, their whim, not the machinations of the game or the actions of the player. And if you just keep ripping that out, maybe you'll get to a point where it's just nothing. I mean, I think maybe that's some people aren't really looking for an MMO, but in order to keep it simple, they've basically assembled one because all it is, 5-second scene where I walk into a dungeon and the 5-second scene where I walk through a door because everything else slows the game down and is boring. And it just becomes this point by point, it's like watching a movie, but only seeing 15 frames out of the entire movie and going, well, that's the plot because I don't have the 2 hours to watch the whole film.
I always thought that the numbers, and maybe I've mischaracterized it all this time, but I've always thought that the numbers were the way to make sure that everybody was experiencing the same. It gives you a reference point where you can see if your understanding matches the game master's understanding, then you know that fairness is being applied, right?
Yeah.
Versus it's just capricious. Like one time a dragon is easily killed, and the next time that dragon is impossible to kill. And it almost seems if that's the case, and there's no numbers that you can look at, that you can't say, oh, what's the level of that dragon, or what's my level? Then you're just assuming that the DM or GM is making decisions based on what they want to happen in the story, and you're just window dressing rather than a critical part of making it happen.
Right. And the funny thing is about people who are going for this, well, I hate railroading. If you're a DM and you're just arbitrarily giving X, like Gary said, it's just if they do something cool or something I like, I'll give them some XP for it. Okay, fine. But there's no hard and fast. It's just whatever, like you say, now you're going, what can I do that will please him or make him go, oh, that's a good idea. That's a good thing. I'll give you 500 XP. You start, and that's an argument people make. Now you start chasing the whims of the DM as opposed to playing the scenario that you're in. So I'm all for having strict guidelines and having, but in AD&D, when you read the rules, it's, you just figure out how to do it, use whatever method you want in one paragraph, and then here's some really hard and fast, strict rules that you have to adhere by in the next paragraph. It's contradictory and it makes everything a mess. No wonder people, and people say, well, everybody does it differently. Well, that's why. When you can interpret a sentence 5 different ways, or nobody can interpret it accurately because of the way it's written, people will just fill in that blank with whatever feels good or looks good to them and go on and play. That's what a house rule always was. We had that with wargaming too. There was it's not just Gary or whatever, and he's not unintelligent. It's not that the grammar's bad because somebody's stupid. It's that the grammar's different, and it's just because you're intelligent doesn't mean that it's edited well.
Right.
And we had the same thing. Dunnigan's no dummy. I mean, he worked for the government and all that. Some of the stuff in Panzerblitz, one of the games he wrote, it's not, well, it just didn't even make conceptual sense as a sentence beyond.
Right.
So people would just go, okay, well, here's how we did instead. And then somebody else from across the country go, yeah, we ran that too, but here's how we do it. And they were different. And after 40 years of that, you walk into a room, and if you have 5 Panzerblitz games going, the idea that they're going to be actually, identical is almost absurd because of all these differences. Same thing with D&D. So it at that point, it just becomes more ridiculous for people to start saying, well, you have to play rules as written. Well, they're a discombobulated mess, so much so that people actually have rewritten the book just to make it clear for people to understand it.
Right.
So I am changing. So my perception, my whole thing about, well, you need to learn raw first goes out the window. I was wrong because if if people that were so adamant and terse with me are right that this whole thing is rules and not guidelines, they're all over the map. Who the hell would want to use that?
Right.
So I keep it real simple in that what I like to do is I have a list of things that are in black and white that if they are accomplished, killing a monster, unlocking a safe, this kind of thing, solving a puzzle, whatever. I have an XP value that's assigned to that, or a range. Maybe it's a real easy puzzle, so it's only 50 XP. But you know, if it's a real brain teaser, it's 500 XP. But at least there's a black and white list. And if you achieve those, this is no innovative thing. There's other RPGs that do that, but I like to use it that way. But what I also like to do is not insist that I'm some sort of that my game is all about these black and white paragraphs that you have to adhere to, or you're doing it wrong, or that they're meant to be only this way as you interpret them. I like to have it be a guideline type of thing. You can play it any way you want once you buy it from me, but I really like the idea of having a set of points that are given for XP based on different actions, and none of them is how much gold. The gold is an afterthought. It's just how you buy better gear and stuff later on.
Right. Or, yeah, I mean, it can be representative of you being able to find wealth in the game and maybe advance. Like if you're trying to build up a territory and you need to finance something that you're trying to, entice more people to come and you're going to build up an army. Gold could be important in that sense, but it wouldn't directly lead to experience as a fighter. The one thing I wanted to go back to is the essence of like why there are rules and why there are numbers. And I think essentially the whole purpose of any rule set in any game, whether it's D&D or baseball, it doesn't matter, is that everyone involved knows what is considered a win and what is considered a loss. If that's capricious and just determined because you can just free flow with it,
All right.
or because there's a secret story that only the umpire knows. Like, say you had to play a game of baseball where the normal rules applied most of the time, but once randomly during the game, a home run would cause your players to lose all their points. And you
Mm-hmm.
didn't find that out until halfway into the game. Everybody would lose their ever loving mind because it would be like, "Whoa, I worked for all these points and something that was normally would have caused me to win the game now just deleted all of the points I had. Why would that happen? I feel like you ripped me off there, you
Yeah.
know." And that's it's because the game rules are unexpected and inconsistent. So whatever they are, they just need to be clearly understood by all parties involved and, you know,
Right.
then I
Right.
think that gives people a way to know whether or not to do something as well. Do I take a chance on fighting this dragon? Well, dragons are really hard. Um, oh wow, I did take that dragon on and he was surprisingly easy. Why is that? Now I feel like, well, I'm glad I didn't die, but
Can,
you
mhm.
know,
Can you see this all right, or do I need to magnify it more on
you'd
the
have to
screen?
magnify it. I can't really see it, no. And I don't really want to. Oh, okay.
Right. So this account that shows up out of nowhere with almost no followers and a few following, and a launch code for a name. These tend to be
Bots, sock
socks or
puppets.
bots, yeah. And this is the kind of vitriol that gets from certain people, But uh, the problem with this stuff is it. This is all. It's all the usual. See right there where I highlight, well, the game move
Yeah.
along, blah blah blah. So uh, and I hate that stuff. And
Well,
but here's the thing, it it's just these words that are constantly repeated. There's no substance to them anymore because they've been used ad nauseum about everything for decades. And what you got here is people that, here's the thing. Remember, like I brought up earlier, you have a 8-page flow chart that describes the entirety of combat. And everybody goes, well, you don't have to do it all at the same time. And once you start to learn it, it's okay. So what you've got there is people that have a tolerance or a preference for somewhat detailed combat. And
okay.
they have and and so you're not going to hear all those obnoxious cliches invoked by those people because they prefer that sort of thing. It's the other stuff. Now you get to this note that Gary wrote that I hate so much. Somebody doesn't like those minute little details. So instead of, I don't like that, I'm not going to play that way, this giant bogus argument is created about how it's going to slow the game down and how it's too difficult to do and it makes it unplayable, and it's, you need these compromises. And like a lot of designers have talked about to me in the past, is that it's all about where you want to focus on and highlight when you make these things. Maybe compromises do need to be made, but there's a it depends on where you are at
Well,
and what you
hold
prefer,
on.
as to what you decide to not highlight and what you do highlight. But again, playable is a fictitious,
Well, hold on.
nonsensical argument.
Let's
Everything's
let's do a.
playable.
If I could interrupt and do a scenario here. So we go in and we have a battle, and we take some treasure from a dungeon that was guarded by a dragon, right? I should be getting experience for the dragon, how many rounds it took to defeat him. If I defeated him in less rounds, that's probably better experience because I was more efficient at it. That means I did a better job with my weapon skills, which means I should have earned some more experience. You could calculate that out. That seems pretty straightforward. It took your team of five, uh, 5 rounds to defeat that dragon. So everybody earns a certain number of experience points. You could calculate that. You could assign a number to how much, experience you get if you take a dragon out in a certain amount of time, or the difference between how powerful your group is and how versus how powerful the dragon is. If that dragon was a tough one and you took him out relatively quickly, you get the difference between that. You get a percentage based on that, because he was twice as strong as your group was, you could get a certain amount. So you're doing a little bit of math, granted, but it's just math on something that you were going to do anyway because you were going to launch attacks at that dragon with your sword, with your arrows, with your magic, whatever. All right. In scenario number 2, you have all those things of gameplay where you're launching all those same kinds of attack. And then after you take the dragon out, you get the gold, you get other treasures that are there. You have to decide, do you want to keep the magic wield weapons and use them to enhance your abilities because of their magical properties, or are you going to convert them to gold? Once you figure out what you can convert them to gold with, which may take waiting because maybe you have to put them in your bag, you have to carry them to the nearest town, you have to sell them for gold, and then you determine the total amount of gold that was received, and then you have to go back through and determine how many each player participate in that, yes or no? How much of the gold was their portion? How much could you actually carry out? And once you've done all of that, then you have additional calculations for how much it costs to go and get training. But how is this less or more efficient to have all the same steps that we had in scenario 1 and then add on all of these additional things? How does that add to, I'm just confused how that adds to greater playability in a more succinct way to level up a character and gain experience.
Because it's
Just to,
faster.
is it
That's what it is.
faster?
Oh yeah. I mean,
How is it faster though?
because if you can, here's the thing. This is why I brought it up before. If you take out encumbrance, which a lot of people do because it's mathy, and they
Okay.
don't like it. So now you can carry whatever you want, or you're limited by some arbitrary, I don't want to do math limit that is probably way out of proportion for what you could really carry. And you get that snotty, it's not a simulation thing, which I got from the sock puppet reply, but it is a simulation. If you
Right.
if you're in a game, video game or board game, where you have this imaginary world that you're in and you're conducting things within it, your combat or whatever, that combat is simulated. It doesn't matter how good you think it is. It doesn't matter how more uh, higher resolution the simulation is if it's some professional thing. If you think, well, it's not a simulator, I'm not sitting at Pool Hall at Fort Knox or whatever, it's still a simulation.
Right.
So if you're simulating gravity, you're simulating time. If you play with time, you're simulating weather and everything else. So yes, it is a simulation. And
Right.
it's one of those arguments people go, well, if I don't like it, if you're having too much detail or detail I don't like, they go, you're trying to be a simulation, and they mean there's some pejorative, but it's just this non-argument that
Well,
shuts
yeah,
people
yeah,
down.
it's a matter of degree. I mean,
It's
you're
like
right.
it's just name calling. It's like calling.
Right.
It's like saying, "Well, you can't say that you're a racist or you're a fascist or you're a communist or you're this, that, or the other thing." It's just it hasn't. It's a non-argument. But a lot of
Okay.
people use it because it works. Because
Okay.
people go, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, I don't want that. I want a simple game." But here's the thing: if you allow people to carry as much as they can in a unordinately large amount of time to do so, then all they have to do is keep stumbling across rich monsters, kill them. And all of a sudden, and because it's a game about how many XP points of XP you get in order to get to the next level. And then a lot of people don't like to have to go to the training thing, just like the OD&D we were playing. Because a couple of those guys kind of moaned about having to go into town to do that. They don't want to do it. They want it to be like an MNO, like a video game where as soon as you cross that plateau, or that threshold, I should say, boom, all of a sudden you can just start writing in all these new stats.
Right.
And if you do it that way, then like I brought up the forum earlier, it's called Dragon's Foot, and they asked about it. Some they being one person really, but it was a discussion with a bunch of people about how this makes it really easy to level up. There's a particular famous module that they were discussing that is known to be chock full of treasure. And if you play through that whole module where you don't have the limitations or you give people XP for money, you can jump 5 levels playing that game. And it's like going from a private to a master sergeant in a week. It doesn't really play out to be very realistic. And then people go, well, it's not supposed to be realistic. It's a fantasy game.
Well,
Well,
yeah, that's true, but
what you want to do,
still
what it is,
realistic within the rules of the game itself, internal
yeah,
consistency of the game.
yeah, and, and the fact that it may be, it's like people who buy a video game and then get the cheat codes and say they're having fun, because what it is you're just leapfrogging through the levels with as little effort as possible, because effort is hard and it makes the game complex
I'm
and
going to ask for
unplayable.
an exception on The Sims because, um, having to send your sim to work every day really sucks.
Right. So for all the people that, and you included, frankly, that get on my case because I'm a little too harsh on this stuff, as soon as I brought that up as a possibility, that's when all of a sudden people started to get real personal, real foul mouthed, and real nasty. And
Okay.
so
I don't agree with any of that, but
must have hit the mark.
I don't feel like again like I'm understanding how translating gold to experience saves time. It doesn't make sense to me because you could just have all the actions that you're doing in the game to get the gold would be experience. So why don't you just get the experience from those actions?
Right. And you do in some cases, in a lot of cases, really. but then you get the gold on top of it. And that's another example of why you
So
rocket
you're
through the
like double
levels.
dipping.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I
And that's why
see.
you rocket through the levels. And I like the idea of it really meaning something to go up a level, as opposed to something expected to happen.
Okay,
Yeah.
here's something else, and this is probably not going to make me any friends. And I am a new player, and so I could be interpreting it wrong. Again, I'm always going to use that caveat because I don't know that I'm sure there are people who've played for a long time, but as sometimes people with a new perspective can see things that people who have been doing it long enough that they don't see what's right. Do you know what I mean? Like you live in your hometown, you never like that time when I lived on the East Coast and someone came to visit me and said, "Yeah, did you notice like almost every street is named after British royalty?" And I'm like, "Wow." No, I never really noticed it. I just took it for granted. But but yeah, it was like that. Um, anyway, the the point that I'm making is when it comes to experience levels, as your character gains in experience, what typically happens, at least from the things that I have played so far, is that the monsters that you face also get more difficult. I mean, you're not going after a level 1 kobold or something still after you've leveled up 4 or 5 levels. You're taking on a more, um, beefy monster, if you wanna, let me use that term, whatever you wanna call it, a substantial, monster that is more difficult to kill. So as your experience level goes up, so does the experience level of the fighter of the quarry you're fighting, right? Am I wrong about that, or don't you just end up kind of back to the same place where I don't know, am I wrong?
I
So say I go up to level 10. I'm not gonna be fighting against level 1 monsters anymore at level 10
No,
if
see
you're a
that it's
DM.
not an MMO.
Oh,
And
okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
it's not like Lotro like that. No.
Okay, because that's what happens in MMOs, and it's kind of like, well, what's the point in going up in level? What the cool thing is in that situation, going up in level and gaining experience is the new powers and abilities you have, which, you can get those from the weapons that you pick up as well, or
Yeah.
from new spells you learned or new skills you picked up. Like now I can shoot a bow with twice as many arrows, whatever it is that you can use fire arrows now where you couldn't before because you were too new and you'd burn your fingertips off or whatever. I don't know.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it's I don't know. All I know is that if you want to learn how to swing a sword better, start swinging a sword and have somebody teach you.
Right.
And paying that person, you can pay that person, not listen to them and not learn anything, and they're still going to keep the money, and you're not going to be any better. And when you break this down, this you know and you ignore it's not a simulation, it's not the arguments so far that I've seen from the bots and the other respondents are that it's not fun. Fun is subjective. I don't find the way that you play this game fun. You don't find the way I play it fun. Fine, but that's not an argument. That there's no definitive argument. Just because you think it's not fun doesn't mean it's not right, or it is wrong, or whatever. Fine, don't have fun. I will, and that's why.
Okay.
And that's why the note cheeses me off to the degree it does, because
Uh-huh.
and why I always get so spun up about it. People go, "Why you get on? You're not." But the thing is right there, you've now painted a whole generation of people that glom onto this game as being the end all be all. And I got it in replies. I got two bots that just scripted replies about simulation and playability. And now everybody says that shit with a closed mind instead of looking at a game and finding some interest in something different with a little depth and getting into it It's all just the same foundation of the most basic version they can find and doing slipshot stuff because anything more is too complicated or takes too much time. And instead of admitting, look, I'm just trying to play a fast game, it's like the difference between I have time for a mobile game or I have time for Baldur's Gate. But
Right.
instead of just saying all I have time for, some people do because they don't have an ego and they don't care, that they go, I just don't have time for that, so I just play this slimmer version. But some people have to create this giant defensive argument around it and try to build themselves up as being an experienced and more knowledgeable player and try to tell you why you're playing wrong, why they scream at you for saying that you're trying to tell them how to play. It becomes this.
Right.
And the reason I'm bringing this up is because these things, people are talking about these things all the time. And one of the things that keeps coming up is that it's this spinning wheel of these things. And a lot of it has to do with what I'm talking about, why they keep coming up.
Right. And one of those things you keep bringing up is realism versus play, the gameplay or whatever. And here's what, to me, I don't see how those are contradictory. I mean, obviously, you've got to have some format of the game that you're going to be playing, or else, if there's no, if you can't put yourself in the picture, you can't play a role playing game if you don't understand that there's a role for you with rules that apply, with conditions that are simulating something that you have to deal with, because if there's no challenge, there's no game, right? But at the same time, if you're saying you don't want realism, then what do you want? Do you just want, I shot you? No, you didn't. I mean, where
Right.
where I can just go, okay, you would have maybe shot me, but because I just made up this magic ability on the fly, you didn't actually hit me. I mean, there's
That's
got to be some kind of consistent rules,
right.
and that creates realism within the universe
Right.
of the game itself. And
That's
that
another one.
way, all players involved know what's a winning move and what's a losing move.
Right. Right. Right.
Okay,
And yeah.
just so we're clear, I'm kinda, because it kinda almost seems like the words are being used in the opposite way. Like,
Yes.
realism doesn't really mean, it's like in The
I've
Princess
read
Bride, I don't think you mean that word means what you think it means.
and I've
It's kind of
and
what I
I've
feel
had
like
that.
about that.
I've had people, you get a lot with this. You get, well, you can never really get realism out of a game anyway, so why even try?
But people are trying. The point is to the degree or the method of try.
Right. And
And
then
to
they do this, that the more you attempt to achieve realism, the less realism the war game is. A realistic war game is the least realistic. What the hell are you talking about? And they start making these very basic things and saying that's realism because a battlefield is chaos.
Is it though?
Fuck.
I mean, there are parts of it that are chaos, but when the armies walk out to a battlefield, they're usually very well ordered. I mean,
Exactly.
there's
The
an
chaos
what
comes
appears
from
chaos on the surface
yeah,
is actually very ordered
right.
behavior.
Now you have an inordinate amount of combat veterans in America because of sustained amounts of combat operations over the past couple of decades, and they get real shitty with you when you bring this up, like you're trying to take some experience away from them, or you just don't understand because you weren't there, just like the Vietnam guys do. And I know all the guys in the sandbox, they get all nutso about this shit, and no one's saying that. We're not taking your emotional issues, your psycho what happened there with you is not being disregarded, disparaged, misinterpreted. We're not talking about that. We're talking about modeling systems. Now,
Well,
uh,
and hold on, let me define what I
it's a
mean when
much
I
different.
say when I say chaos versus order. Okay. Chaos is who's fighting on whose side is changing every 5 minutes. To me, that would be chaos.
Hmm.
Like you go into the battle as an American soldier, but 5 minutes in, you decide, oh no, I don't think that it's going that way. So I'm going to jump to the other side for a few minutes, and you can't tell what's going on. You can't tell up from down. Um, Suddenly your gun turns into a fish. That would be real, truly chaos. What I mean is that it may be it can be a very jarring experience. There can be a lot of unexpected events. It's terrorizing and it's a lot of other things that are but that's not really what chaos means. Chaos is complete disorder and nobody knows what to expect. But there
Hmm.
are trainings and people are trained for battle because there are things you can expect. There are rules that you can be taught that will help you survive that kind of the events that you're going to be facing. So there is predictability to it. Like you can expect that you might have to take cover and hide so you don't get shot. You might expect that there's going to be aerial bombardments that you're going to have to listen for and react to, or other types of things. So it's
Right.
there's the unexpected is occurring, but it's not chaos per se. There
Well,
are rules to it. There's known knowns and unknown known. You know what I mean?
here's the thing, and
Uh,
this is when it's this: when you create a simulation or a game world, irregardless of if it's inside a computer or not, you start with the basic parameters and rules of how things work. If it doesn't matter if it's the genre is doesn't effing matter. You're gonna say how far that rocket flies. Now, some of that may be in a computer game might be governed by how many compute cycles or pieces of RAM or whatever the hell that you have. So I know in some cases, like I've played Battlefield 2, and the range on the tank gun is asinine, and the way that it flies is completely unrealistic. And you get a mod that changes that, and all of a sudden the frame rate goes through the floor and it won't work anymore. So I understand those are compromises that have to be made because of the limitations of the machinery, but nonetheless you're still giving the thing a acceleration of gravity. Uh, you're talking about how weather affects visibility. If there's mud in the game, you're going to tell the computer that when this tank rolls over that spot that's darker than the other brown, that's mud, make it go slow or whatever. Those are all physical conditions. And all those are put into things like AD&D. And that makes it the simulation people keep saying it isn't.
because those things are predictable.
Yes.
Even if they may not be exactly 100% in line with reality, especially in a
Right.
fantasy game, they're predictable because in order to play a game with rules, there has to be predictable rules that apply in predictable situations to
Right.
some degree.
It,
But
yeah.
of course, you can have the unexpected, and that's why the beauty of the role playing games and the live tabletop human driven role playing games is that there is a game master or dungeon master who is able to step in and deal with those unexpected events and interpret them, find some way to interpret them. And if they have a reasonable guide for interpreting them that still sticks with the internal, is internally consistent, it's consistent with what the rules that everybody's familiar with is play as being played, as long as everything's consistent, people are happy with that, which I think, and I could be wrong, but I think that's why you get so much pushback when you're talking about trying to find a different way to account for experience, because people have already learned the other way. It's
No.
consistent for them now, and they understand it, and it makes sense, and they can play within that context and know exactly what to expect. You
Well,
go changing that, nobody knows what to expect, and they've been told to expect boredom, tedium,
well, yeah. It's
unpleasant things.
that's what simulation means. It means it's got the too many rules in places I don't like the rules. It just boils down to I don't like it. And
Right.
and again, that note that gets me so spun up That's this cornerstone of philosophy for a lot of these players. And if you challenge it, they get like a bull charging it red. And that's why I get bots replying to me with nasty invectives and stern, because for some reason it makes people snap a little bit when you go after it. It allows them to have the well, I don't have to learn the difficult stuff, or whatever it is, or I can play on easy mode and make it sound like I'm a real skilled veteran. And or they
Well,
just,
and here's the thing, if they're just saying, because it is true that people have the right to play whatever kind of game they want. Nobody's ever going to say that that's not the case. But if you're saying that one game is better than the other because I like chocolate better than vanilla, that's accurate. But if you're saying that one game is poison and the other one is healthy, that's a different
right,
standard. You have to prove that. You have to
right,
prove that the one you don't like is actually poison.
right,
And it's
right,
not necessarily provable because it's a matter of preference, personal
right.
preference, which
Play
one
what
is
you
going to be
want, but
better. Yeah,
right, and this has been my whole thing. This is why I get so mad about this stuff. Is that what you're doing is you're poisoning the well for potential
right,
players when they look at it and they go, well, I might not play at all because this guy's an expert. He sure plays a lot of these games and he says that they're boring, tedious simulations unless you do this. Well, then I'm never going to do anything but that because I don't want that tedium. And
right.
now you've just shat all over somebody else's idea of fun and ruined a potential. I've had people who have come to me and said, I think I'd like to try these war games. I had a neighbor that I used to go out and have lunch with, and he says, yeah, I'll give it a shot. And he looked at it, and he had an open mind. And then he went in, he goes, I just wanted to learn more, so I went into a store. He went into a store and told them what he was going to play with me. And they gave him all that horse shit that drives me nuts. And that was it. And then he didn't want to play anymore.
Right.
So it's a close-minded thing, and that's why it bothers me so. For they'll say that they're being open-minded, and they'll talk about how they're being victimized for being told how to play in a different way that they don't like or whatever. But they'll use these invectives in a debate or argument with you that puts you down, puts the game you want to play down, and tells you you're doing it wrong, and it's bullshit.
Yeah, that's true. But, again, I think that in some cases, the best counter to that is really to show that you can play a game that accounts for XP in a different way. Not that you could not ever consider gold and treasure as something that would convert to greater advantages in the game. Like, say, for instance, you've got enough gold, you can buy, extra potions or extra tools that would make your job easier, something like that. But to say that just having money makes you better, I think and this may just be the anarchist in me. I have a little teeny one, not a big one, just a little one, little miniature one, that basically says, I just don't like it whenever anybody says that wealth equals superiority automatically, whether it's intelligence or better fighting skill or anything like that. Being rich does not make you a better fighter
Well, it's here,
or a
yeah.
better
No,
person.
it doesn't.
Or,
But
yeah,
to be fair, the argument is that we fast forward through what you've done with the money. The fact that you've acquired it is enough to assume that you've used it in order to obtain.
well, now,
And then,
isn't that
but
a
then,
case of having your cake and eating it too, though?
and
If you
then,
get the money and you're assuming that you're going to use it to advance your skills, but you still have the money in your bag
well,
of
right,
holding or whatever,
yeah.
then aren't you getting both? You're
See, that's the next thing. So then,
because
so
you didn't
again,
spend
that,
it on those things. You
right.
just
Well,
it was
did you see? That's
assumed
a
you would, but
Well, maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But that's the thing is that the next thing in here, like I said earlier, where I granted we're kind of repeating ourselves, but
sorry.
nonetheless, you go in there. Well, it's as much me as you. But the thing is I don't know that you had to be brought up to speed. I didn't tell her about this very well. I just told her we're going to do this and to follow my lead. So she's trying to understand what we're talking about.
Right.
That
And as a new
might not have been
player,
the best thing to do this way, but
no, I think there's an advantage to it because as a new player, I've got questions. How does this work exactly? So how does having more money or equating gold to experience really work? You the assumption is you're going to use the gold to gain better experience, but none of the gold's deducted out of your bag.
so right here's now. Let me read this from the thing. I think I have this up. I may have to, yeah, make it bigger for you. Of course, if I make it bigger for you, then I can't really read it that well. But
Are
just
you
bear
just
with.
promising the trainer you're going to pay him out of your gold and then you're just keeping it, not paying the
Well,
bill?
that's the thing. I don't know how many of these people that claim they do rules as written actually do rules as written, because it was just like today somebody made some joke about this. He mocked having arguments over rules, and he says rules don't matter. So my reply was to invoke a set of
Ah,
rules that are oh, that sounded like a coffee drink going down.
stop it, kitty.
Um, but I said, oh, rules don't matter. And then I invoked what is typically considered one of the more complex and hard or unplayable games called Phoenix Command. And I said, okay, let's play Phoenix Command on a broad level. Tell me that the rules don't matter now, because they do. So, but anyway, let's just read this. Can you see this okay? No,
Um,
you're not looking.
yeah,
You're fucking
yeah.
around with a cat.
No, I can read it.
All right. So experience points. See, this is the funny thing. So for all the people that are arguing, all the discussion we just had about the arguments that people make, the my counter argument is with the contradiction that AD&D is. The next subject matter, when you get past it, is exactly what I'm saying. Experience points are merely an indicator of the character's progress towards greater proficiency, which is what I put in the threads that now you've got to dance around a bunch of sock puppets that are saying nasty things. But if you get past that, you can see me bringing that up. And people that were at least a little bit more level-headed about it. Greater is a progress towards greater proficiency in his or her chosen profession. Upward progress is in huge bold letters, or at least capital, is never
I see it.
automatic. That's exactly what I don't like, the automatic flip over. Just because Nell Nimblefingers, the rogue of Thieves Guild, has managed to acquire the needed 1,251 experience points does not, huge letters again, mean that she suddenly becomes Nell Nimblefingers the Footpad, which is the term for the next level up. And it goes on to explain that you have to go through quite a bit of things in order to get the training. And that doesn't mean, and no one ever said that means that they're going to go do anything in the list of that obnoxious note that is in the page previous to this one. But what they were saying, or what I always said before and after reading it, is I didn't necessarily want to do any of that, although some of those things on the list are part of the game and fun as hell to play, and I would do them in a heartbeat. But no, I'm talking about considering the idea that you're going to have to take that experience and convert it into proper training. And that has a cost both in time and in money to do.
Now,
And
when
when
you say it has a cost in time, does that mean that it is time that you like all the players have to sit and watch a stopwatch and sit there for 5 minutes twiddling their fingers until the time passes for
no,
you to have learned it? Okay, what does it mean when you say it takes a set amount of time?
because this is done with the idea that there's no real time. The fanatics that I talked about say you should play this game in real time. Another poorly worded paragraph, and the want to interpret it in a particular way that it wasn't intended to be interpreted as, has assured these fanatics that it was meant to be played in real time, in that just because you can't play anymore because it's Friday night and it's midnight and mom makes you go home doesn't mean that the game stops. That somehow
Oh,
it's still rolling, time's still rolling in the imaginary simulated world that you have created, and that if you have laid down for the night as a character in a dungeon and walked away from making decisions, doesn't change the fact that the monster in there may wander into your uh, room and attack you, which is asinine and everybody thought was stupid. Instead, what you
Right.
do is you have war game like sections of times that are turns. And so if you have this game wasn't meant to be played as most people play it now. This much I know for a fact because you just read how people played it. And most people say, well, you can't have any more than 3 to 5 players. So if one goes down or can't play, you get what you and I get when we want to play Star Wars. All of a sudden, 2 or 3 people don't show up and the game kind of folds because you don't have enough people to play. Whereas before, to kind of mitigate that and change things around, you usually had a bunch of underlings, hirelings that you purchased, or NPCs or something like that. So you didn't go down into a dungeon with 3 people or 4 people. You went down there with 15 people, something like that. As far as 15 characters.
Uh-huh.
So what it's meant to do is the ones that are being trained. This is all discussed in great detail inside these books, and I don't even have the time to read them all, but I recommend you go and check them out. And I'll show you where they are, where it's explained. Well, hell, let's just do it now. I have to load the other one, but it's in this one. Let's take a look. But basically, I'll just summarize it for now because people will get bored. But basically, what it is that how many turns is a week? Let's get back to the page, or 2 weeks, or whatever it's got. Let's go down here again, take a look. So level of training character times the 1,500 weekly cost during study training. Okay, what's weekly? If you're using 6 4-hour turns in a 24-hour day, then that's 6 turns times 7. That tells you how long they're out. Think of it as, or let's do it even easier. It's how long is your semester, or how long is your night school class? Are you taking a night school class that starts on the 1st of January and ends on the 30th? Okay, then that's your training schedule, and that character's out for a month doing the training. And they're paying the price in time, a month, and in money to receive that training in order to elevate to the next level. Now,
and that's happening in between game session.
Well, it could be, but people
to the
go,
next game.
well, no. People go, I can't play with my character. That's stupid. Why would I do that? Because you have more than one.
Right.
No, but we never played this game where we just wrote a character and go, okay, it was like Pac-Man. We wrote 3 or 4 at a time, and they sat there in a stack. They were our NPCs. They were NPCs or hirelings or friends or whatever. And if one died, that guy's toast. Now I go change my perspective and I jump into, think of you as a soul that, I hope this doesn't offend somebody some religious way or anything like that. It's not meant to, but as a soul that inhabits the meat puppet. The meat puppet is your character. If one dies, you transfer to another one. Now you're piloting that one. So the game doesn't stop because one person has to get up and leave because they don't have a character to play. They just jump into a different character because you're not playing with 5 because you have 5 people. You're playing with 15 because each person has 3. So when one levels up, you jump into the next one. And then people say, well, what if they all level up at the same time? They don't all have to go to the school all at once. You can round robin them out. Now, again, there's a very detailed explanation with scenarios and all that written in this book that explains all of that. So, but yeah, if you feel better about it, or you absolutely refuse to play with more than one character or piece, then yes, you can do the old thing where, well, 5 days have passed since last session, and Nell Nimblefingers is now a footpad because she's been at the at the Thieves Guild learning how to pick a lock or whatever the scenario is. So there you go. But that was the intention. And so between logistics, taxes, expenses, and cost to arm, upkeep yourself and others, if you have others, all of that is a leash that makes advancement very difficult on purpose, because you don't just spend 2 weeks of your life going from the lonely or lowly squire to King Arthur. It takes some time. And this was meant to be a simulation. It may take most of your life. You start as a young person around 18, is what they say. Yeah, and you might be 30 before you become a king or something like that. It makes achieving things more rewarding and interesting because they're not handed to you on a silver platter because you learned how to rob Smog while he was sleeping. See?
That is quite an accomplishment.
Well, right. And if you're a thief, it is.
Yeah.
But if that's all you're doing, then the game sucks and is boring, no matter how simple and easy it is. And that's why I take such issue with the gold for XP thing.
Yeah, I totally get it. And it does make sense. So I don't think that the controversy over it is going to end anytime.
Oh no, I haven't. All I've done is, unfortunately, is probably lose a couple of followers and get some people teed off and all that. But then that wasn't the intention of it. But it is amazing that that as far as Twitter goes, that I go from the 2 or 3 replies that I would get if I'm lucky just by talking to damn near 20 because I said something relatively contentious that everybody has read 1,000 times already on Twitter. So, but again, the visceral replies that elicit people to change their account and harangue me over it, I think really shows that there's a sensitive spot, and that when you expose it, there's more than just, well, I'm knowledgeable and this is the way that the rules work. Or they would make the statement and go on with it, but they get like this because I think it's a crutch for a lot of people. It's a shield, and it's a way they want to play. And I think that a lot of people see things the way I see it, as far as, well, if you introduce a style of play or rules critique, it may change people's minds. In fact, one person said to me, he goes, well, I'm going to kind of reevaluate things. This is interesting. And they see, as we've discussed before, the potential of their player pool shrinking because of it. And that's why they come knives out.
That's one of the things that I think is always a factor that people are looking at. There is a certain number of gamers that like to play these types of games, and that's a player pool, and that's being competed over, because you got to have enough people to sit at your table to play any of the games. And if everything gets too fractional, then you end up with a situation where there's not enough players to play all of the wondrous varieties of games that are out there that everybody might want to play or try, or all of that as well. So I think that makes a contentious situation. I also think that some of it is the nature of what happened with Twitter. Not to get into any kind of politics about it, but I think that there were a lot of folks, myself included, to be quite frank, that saw the changes of ownership in Twitter and said it's not going to be a safe place for someone like me anymore, and I'm just going to leave. So anybody who was more on the mild mannered side, more on the I prefer, decorum and debates that aren't always heated, that don't have to go to that heated place first. I think a lot of those folks left already. So I don't know. I don't have any evidence of that, but I just feel that that's the case.
Well, I mean, I'm not a fan of him either, but to be fair, this kind of reaction and this kind of back and forth that has occurred over the day, because I initiated it, is nothing new and is not platforms. Everywhere you've ever gone, or I've ever gone where something like that has happened, I've seen this kind of thing. It just generates strong and ridiculous reactions because I think there is a lot of people that see it as, if I don't play that way, or if people start wanting to play a different way, then I'm going to start losing players or have to play that way. And I don't want to play that way because it's too hard or too complex or whatever it is.
Or
But
because I heard it was bad from someone else who said it was bad, or any number of reasons, or because I like chocolate and it's vanilla, or vice versa.
because Gary said, that's another one, because
Oh,
Gary
yeah.
said. And we've had
Yeah.
that conversation with the only person left that knew him personally as a friend, and says, you have to understand that Gary said a lot of things. Some of them are quite contradictory. In fact, gave a 2.5 hour talk on a live that I watched about how these books themselves are rolling contradictions, and that the introductions versus the conclusions literally oppose one another, because you had a situation where the man had to run, he was running a business, and that business had to succeed. And in order for that business to succeed, it needed to make products that were made for purchase. And to make those products made for purchase had to be antithetical to his philosophy on how to play games. And that
Right.
when that no longer was the case anymore, because things had happened that we won't go, because that's a long story, but he was no longer the head of a company, all of a sudden he had the freedom to express himself as the gamer that he always was versus the game designer and CEO that he had been in during the TSR years. And those people go, well, he said this here, but he said, to simplify it, he said left then, and now he's saying right. Well, A, because he's got two different hats on, and B, people are allowed to change their mind over time. So,
We
but
are?
if, yes,
Are
but
you sure?
if you read this book, if you read the book that's caused this contention from stem to stern, or just read the foreword and the preface and then read the stuff in the back, you'll go, this thing is actually contradicting itself. And the reality is he wasn't a fan when it came to playing of having these strict rule sets anyway, and having to say, this is the way the rules are and you will adhere to the rules. And he says several times in the book that no matter what, no matter what happens, it's the at the end of the day, all decisions, all rulings, all rules, the way we play is the way the DM says we play when we sit down to play. Period. And one example of him saying that was just given a few days ago by Rob, who gave some anecdote about somebody came up and asked him to make a ruling about, hey, we don't understand, how do you do this rule? And the answer Gary gave was, ask your DM next question. It doesn't, because that was his philosophy.
Well,
And
and it's kind of makes sense to me because with these games, it's a very personal. So if you had to have someone else coming outside of your gaming circle, so you've got a group of people, 5, 6, 10, however many people are regularly meeting and they're playing a game and they have been doing it consistently for a while. They've built up a set of expectations, what the rules are, what's expected of the player, the DM, the monsters, the environment, with the rule set itself. And then all of a sudden, someone from outside, whether that is by means of a book that everybody's consulting or by means of somewhere else, is saying, well, this is the way it needs to be done. And it contradicts what you've been doing, or, it messes up whatever that DM or GM had in mind. That would just destroy that group. So they are kind of, it's like, I imagine them as like tiny villages, that are existing, and you're part of that organization. If someone else were to come in from outside and take over and start issuing orders, it's like you've been conquered, and
mhm,
nobody likes that. So,
mhm.
kind of makes sense for it to be kicked back to whoever is hosting the game.
Yeah, yeah. It's as much as I am a old, perceived as some old fuddy duddy. Here's the thing, I don't like. I like the stuff that was printed in the 70s and 80s. That's just the way I like to play. and I'm all about enjoying the nostalgia of the 70s and 80s, playing Atari and all that sort of stuff. I like to consider myself old school in that sense. It's why I gave the name before I even knew what the hell OSR was. I just went old school because that's just me, old school. But that doesn't. It was still funny and ironic and somewhat entertaining to watch all these people who were adamant freaks about you have to play the way those rules say, and this is what these rules say, and there's no variation. And that's the way. And a lot of them said that's the way Gary did it because Gary wrote the book. And then have Gary's personal friend and co-designer and some of this stuff go, nope, he didn't. That wasn't him at all. It was, we all played it differently. We all had our own set of rules. And when I DM'd, it was different than when Dave Arneson, another co-designer, played than when Gary did it and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
So
the DM kind of reminds me of like the chef, and no chef wants another chef in his kitchen going, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
This is my recipe. Stay hands off.
It was fun to watch these people who had been so fanatic that they were just telling everybody that you don't know how to play this game and you're playing it wrong if you don't do it the way this blah 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 because Gary said. No, don't use that as that credentialism stuff is a bunch of bogus, and it's not. So one of the other points to wrap this up, I want to get into what I do instead of talking about what other people did, 45 years ago. But the other part of contention was the verbiage in this makes it, he uses the phrase suggestion, prerogative, player choice, but somehow that means that it's still a rule and you have to do it, even though all those phrases invoke and mean the antithesis of a hard and fast rule. And they say, well, that's only for this particular section. Why? How do you know? Because the bold font changes that? Maybe, maybe not. If it does, it's a ridiculous contradiction where he says A and B and then back to A throughout just a couple of paragraphs. Or you just want to make it a rule because that's the way you want people to interpret it to play.
Or because that's what you're comfortable with, or somebody else told you years ago and you don't want to change now.
Because Gary said.
Or Gary said.
So,
it didn't necessarily have to be Gary. Not everybody even knows the name, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, when it comes to AD&D, it's always about what Gary said because that's, he's associated with that. But to me, if that's I don't want to get too nasty about it, but I literally would have just walked away from it. My uncle gave me all that material because he worked with TSR. And if I had read that paragraph the way these people are insisting it's supposed to be read, I would have stopped asking for that shit in 1980. I wouldn't want it any more to do with it because I don't like that much. And I have other great games. I have Star Wars. Unfortunately, nobody will play that at all anywhere. Sci-fi is supposedly a genre that's dying because they're not doing it right or whatever the hell that is. I heard that from some authors. But anyway, that's one of the reasons I decided I want to have my own thing and use my paracosmic convergence to do everything. And so the way I would do, or the way I do, as we were trying to talk about earlier, experience it's through the usage of your skills. It's by in the field practice or in the field usage. If you're a fighter and you get into a fight, that's experience gained, whether you win or whether you lose. As long as you live through it, there's something to be learned. You're not going to be as rewarded with as much experience for losing as you would be winning, but you're not going to walk away with no experience simply because you lost, unless you're dead. Then obviously it doesn't matter.
Or so badly injured that you can't fight anymore.
Well, that's temporary. Unless you decide you want to give up. A lot of people don't like the injury thing when I bring it up. So, well, that just means I get maimed right away. And but again, I don't want I never played where I was adhered to my character like it was Old Yeller. Um, and I
Well, no, no, no,
don't
no,
want to do that.
no. Old Yeller was ultimately sacrificed, so you do want to be.
Well, the point is that, or any other pet, it's not. There's people that act like if they lose their character, somebody has euthanized their favorite dog in front of them. And I want to make sure that people understand that all I'm talking about is a meat puppet. It's not even meat. It's just a uh,
But I love my character.
right. But they get so into it,
Yeah, we do.
and not no. The whole point is that you should be attached to it only after you get somewhere with it.
But I love every character I've ever had,
I don't what.
especially the ones who've died. It's okay if I do. I remember my very first character I played with that got killed by a Wookiee, and I
Well,
was very sad about it.
that's okay. That's
Right.
fine. But the point is that some people act like if you die in a game, like they won't tolerate it, or they act like
Well,
they
yeah,
need
I didn't, like, quit playing. I didn't
right,
go lose my mind,
or they
but
act like
yeah.
they need counseling if they die.
Well, I
It's
did
just
get counseling.
what
No, I'm kidding.
it
I'm
it's
kidding, I'm kidding.
it's just a piece of paper and it's going to be all right. And the idea is that I want to invoke a deep sense of accomplishment for making it through.
Mm.
If you die at one or two or three levels or whatever, that's the way the cookie crumbles. If you make it a lot farther than that, now you've got something to be proud of. I mean, maybe some of it's just pure luck, but nonetheless, you can kind of you can kind of do something, as far as celebration, and then that might be somebody that you want to keep playing with because they've accumulated some actual power.
How many characters or um, how many player characters should you create for any kind of campaign that you're doing? Like,
Um,
should you roll them up in advance and have them should you switch them out in between as you're playing a campaign so that they all gather experience? And how does that work?
you can. I don't understand people that go, well, "I can't play them concurrently." Why not? Are you? I mean, I'm not one for all the accents and all that, and the theatrics. Role playing to me is describing what you're doing because you're looking out the eyes of this simulated character. And sure, there's dialogue, and sure, there can be drama and all that stuff. But some of these people, they go into this theater mindset where they're using accents and stuff like that. And they go, well, I couldn't possibly do three at a time because I can't do three voices at a time. I don't know what to tell you there. That's not my style of play at all. But
Well, if you're able to do that and you like to do that, more power to you. My brother is really good with doing different accents and voices, and he was in drama in school. He likes that kind of stuff, and that's fun for him. I could never pull off a good accent, although occasionally I will kind of like
well,
absorb them
right. Yeah.
accidentally, but
Yeah.
not on
But
purpose.
even without that, all of the theater stuff, there's some people that go, well, I can't do three. I don't know what it is. I, I don't know what it is that keeps them from being able to do that. But I would. I mean, if you want to play three at a time, that's fine. I mean, that's a way to do it.
Well, okay.
But you don't have to do it that way. But you can have three and just wait, or you don't have to do it. I mean, here's the other thing. Like I said before, this isn't about strict rules and procedures. The only thing I'm saying is it's an extremely lethal game as far as characters go. You're and people. Some people go, well, that's no fun. Okay, well then maybe it's not for you. If you want to be immune to death, or you want to have 15 saving throws or whatever. I mean, I'm 5E's out there, but uh, but I want to have something where it can happen in a blink of an eye.
Hmm.
And instead of going, well, that's a sucky game, maybe try to look at something uh, different. Have an open mind and approach a game where lethality is high and therefore character worth is low until that character really gets into some higher levels. Then you may be a little bit more discouraged if he finally dies or she finally dies, as opposed to the level 1, 2, or 3, where it's like, well, yeah, that's the way the cookie crumbles. But that means that you should play with more than one character. Why people say they can't do that, I don't understand or know. They never really go any. I've never had anybody go into any depth or detail as to why that is, other than I don't want to, which is a viable enough, explanation, I suppose. But I don't want to play sorry. So maybe it's, again, I don't want to keep telling people F you if you don't like my game, or it's not your type of game to everybody, but there is some people that just, you ain't into apples, you're into oranges. Okay, it's cool. But I think it's a different approach that is fresh and new, or at least something that hasn't been done in a long time, and may be a different way to look at things, and a little bit more fun in its own right.
Well, and no one's going to know if it's fun or not until they actually try it. And that's really where you get into with all of these. I think it's always suspect to me whenever I hear, and this is not just in the context of what we're talking about today. If I hear someone say, "Oh, don't try that. Don't even try it." Well, why not? Well, because it's just going to be bad. Well, how do you know? Have you tried it? No, I haven't tried it, but I just know because of this other thing that you shouldn't try it. And
Right.
that
They
just
just
makes me suspicious that they just are trying to gatekeep something that might be good, but they're just presuming and they're just making an assumption on no actual experience whatsoever. And
other than a list of buzzwords that invokes perception without any, I don't
well,
have to explain to
that's
you.
the
All
kind
I've
of
got to
thing
do
that
is
makes
call
me
it a
want to try.
simulation,
Right.
and
But
that kind of shit.
the more somebody tells me don't try that, the more I feel like I want to try it
Well,
to see
unfortunately,
for myself.
you're few for
Maybe
yeah, most people are the other way around, unfortunately, and that's why people get so sensitive when they start getting criticism of their system, whether it be their own or a favorite one, as we were just speaking about. That's why
right.
people start coming at you nasty
Well,
instead of
there
just
are
accepting
people
a different
who
opinion.
are like, I'm sure that I'm not alone in the assessment of like, okay, don't tell me that I can't even try it. I mean, yeah, maybe it is what you say, maybe it's not, but the only way I'm going to know is if I try for myself. But here's the thing, you got to give it a try, a fair try, if you're going to be that way, because you don't know
Right.
it unless you put forth a real test of it to see if you would really like it versus just, oh, I showed up, I tried it, I didn't like it, you know,
Mhm. Mhm. So,
in 5 minutes or whatever.
right. So what I
Yeah.
do uh, with the experience, as opposed to gold for XP, is
Hmm.
that um, you're just keeping track, and that's not hard. It's a hash mark. It's cave painting. Um, how many times you've used a particular skill or whatever, and and there's a and whether it was a success or not. That ain't hard, and that gives you some XP. And
So
like I
you'd
said,
have to have like two columns, successful attempt, failed attempt for whichever action it is. And then you would
well, I
just
would
add
just,
up the total.
yes, yes, and or
That's
if
not too
you,
hard.
oh no, it's not. Or if it's still a problem for you, I would it you can. There's a good reason why the DM should be. There's actually two good reasons why the DM should be doing it,
Uh-huh.
because a um, people are extremely sensitive to that kind of thing for whatever reason. So you'll be doing yourself a favor if you alleviate it from them. Secondly, you're doing yourself a further favor as a DM, because now you've got a record of what people you've automatically covered the declaration thing.
Uh-huh.
People tell you what they're about to do, and you can just mark it down.
Right.
So it helps. It helps. But some people just get
Well,
so wound up about having to write something down. I just go there.
I will tell
Psychology.
you, I will tell you one thing I think that drives that is that it, as a player, anything I'm doing that takes me out of imagining myself
Well,
as
that's
that
what they
player.
say, but
Yeah.
Jesus, you're just, the whole thing
Okay.
is that
Well,
the
we're
whole
not lying, you know.
well, but here's the thing. But yeah, but here's the thing. If you're playing a game with hit points, you're writing stuff down all the time, one way or the other.
Right.
So what now? If you're keeping track of gold and XP, you're writing stuff down one way or the other anyway.
Okay.
Is it a video game? Really? How?
No.
Okay, then does glancing at the dice result take you out of the game then too?
No, it's just a matter of degrees of it.
Eh,
It's not I'm not saying that it's like always going to dial you out of feeling like you're a part of the game. I'm just saying that sometimes if it's I think that that's what people mean by saying when they say complexity, they're saying that they have to do all of this stuff that is not related to being in character to,
if you want a character that you manipulate all the time and keep your eyes glued to,
that's a video game. I get it, but no, and video games have their drawbacks too. I mean, nothing is perfect, but I'm just saying there's a balance point where you're looking for something where you can feel like you're
so you wouldn't like it.
participating.
Okay, so it's not a game
I
for
I had
you. You know,
no. So here's the thing.
maybe.
I played a game once where I was taking notes for everybody in the game, and
Well,
I
that's
was
different.
yeah, and I was ending
That's a
up
lot
just
different.
being I was a stenographer. I wasn't really playing,
Right.
and that was not really it made it feel like I wasn't playing a game. It made it feel
Yeah.
like I was just
Sure, and I
working.
understand that. And
Yeah.
see, here's the thing. But for all the people that waggled their fingers about how compromises needed to be made, here's what happens. You keep that rally cry for everything. And now you can't have a game that has any depth or detail or any storyline to it because you get what you just complained about. All right, so now and I'm not saying
Well, not
no, no, no,
I
wait,
mean,
let me just wait. But but the thing is that okay, so people go, I don't want that experience, and nobody does, so we rip all of that out of the game. Okay, now
well,
what can
not
you do?
all.
Just wait, just wait. But what do you do with it now that it's gone? You get that. Well, you can turn it into some half-assed minimized thing, and it's a bunch of TikTok videos. Now, you know, till all it is we've walked from this place to this next place. Here's the stuff we killed. Here's the money we got, and here's all the XP we got for it. What's the next one? Until it's just a series of levels of skirmishes because everything else becomes boring and stuff like that. So if you want to have some depth or some detail, here it's like this. When we looked at a game called Europa, we being me and my friends, and we were enthralled by it. It looked like wow, man, you could fight the whole war. It's a giant game that takes a long time to play, but it was fascinating, enticing. It was the kind of thing we were looking for, and we knew it wasn't going to be played in an afternoon.
Well,
But
yeah,
because we wanted to play it and we were enjoying it, we didn't care. So,
right.
but if and I'm not saying you shut up and like it, write everything down. All I'm saying is instead of finding a way to solve that issue as we used to do, we didn't like a lot of that stuff too. So we looked for ways to expedite it or to
Well,
at
I'm
least
I'm all for that. I'm not.
mitigate it. But other people just go fuck that. I don't want to do it, and it just keeps making the thing till it's flat as pea on a plate as far as any interest.
Well, here's the thing. What I'm trying to get at is that everything is about balance.
Mm.
You've got to balance and what the right balance is for a game, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I'm not a DM, and I get that, I'm here, like, just giving a perspective and just expressing what I feel would be, how I feel about certain things. And if are you just writing down some hash marks or keeping track of something here or there is fine. Calculate, obviously you've got to calculate the results. You don't go into battle and just go. I mean, we're not 5-year-olds, holding pretend guns at each other and going pew pew. I think you're dead. No, no, no. You didn't hit me. You missed. And then we have a big argument, and I take my gun and go home because I don't like it because you're a poopy head or
I
whatever,
understand.
that.
But as
So
far as
so somewhere between that where it's all just like, imagination, and there is no attempt at finding any kind of real result according to any agreed upon rules in advance versus, rules where you're having to spend a lot of time keeping track of it.
I understand,
It's a
but
balance point. That's
all of a
all I'm
sudden,
saying.
it's like here's the thing with taking something down on if you're not when you're taking notes, and again, I understand you getting stuck with it wasn't fun,
Mhm.
and you shouldn't have necessarily been that way. But what you want is you want a game with a story that's interesting. If all
Mhm.
it is this sandbox shit where you just walk around and kill stuff to get money. I used to play that in a video game. It was called oh, there's an arcade. Can't think of it right now. Gauntlet. And all
Oh,
it
yeah.
was you'd run around, and one was a wizard, and one was an elf, and one was a ranger, and you just wasted things in just waves of stuff came at you, and when you killed it all, you ran around and you grabbed uh, treasure chests and power ups.
Right.
That was a fun game, but it was a fun game because it was real time. To do that as a turn based game,
It would get boring and redundant
uh,
real quick.
yeah, yeah, but that seems to be where people want to go, and it seems to be driven mostly by this repetitive. Everything else is a simulation and too hard.
Right.
And
Well, yeah, and I'm not at that level. I
so, well,
think
no, I know you're
everybody
not,
has their comfort
but
zone, and
yeah, I know. Go ahead. I know. I get it.
and finding the right game for you is a matter of finding, what
But what that
what's closest to your comfort
okay?
level, because
But what's
no
gonna
one's ever going to find the perfect
yeah,
game.
well, but what's going to happen then is it's just going to keep going down to more and more simple, basic stuff to the point where it's
I
so you know. Um, the point with taking notes was if you if you have an interesting story and it's captivating people and they want to learn how it ends and they want to solve whatever puzzle may come with it or mystery or whatever, then they're going to be inclined and interested and captivated enough to at least take some notes so that they can finish it. Remember the
Right.
time like this. Remember the time you when you got clone campaigns
Uh-huh.
and
Oh, yeah.
you were so enthralled with it and so determined to become competitive against your opponent with it that you got out a pen and a paper and
Yes.
started writing down tactics. You started writing down shortcuts, cheat sheets, because you were into it.
And
And
results of attempts at, what was going to work best. And
right, lessons learned so that I
yeah.
don't make that mistake. Now that's learning, that's gaining experience, and that's being into it. Those are the
Oh, and I
kinds of things.
gamed that game. I was looking for the cheat that would, make give me an advantage
Right.
versus the other player, and
That
I
to
found
me
it.
is captivating, interesting gaming. And if that's boredom and tedium, then the game sucks, or you're playing the wrong genre or game or something. To me, that's the enjoyment. And that's where I go with what I'm creating, and that's what I go with what I'm looking for to play, is to sit down and submerge myself nose deep in the warm water that is the system and the story. If I stay in the shallow end because everything else is too hard to navigate, then I might as well just go play Baldur's Gate or Gauntlet or some video game.
Yeah.
But I don't have, and it's because it's the same reason people say, well, I don't have the time for that. Neither do I. So when I get it, I want to do it. I can't party very often, so I want the kegger of beer. I want 50 people. I want the rock band playing in the living room. I want everything. I don't want some people just coming over and going, well, we had chips and dips for 20 minutes and we watched a good movie. No, I don't get to do it very often. I don't want to blow my one night of party on something I could do with a handful of people any other night of the week. I want to throw down, mother trucker. And so that's why I want to see some depth, some detail, some interest, some scope to a game. Otherwise, why not just flip the switch on an electric game?
Right.
And that doesn't mean that I want to play something that cracks my head open, requires algebra or whatever. It just means that I'm not going to be deterred because I might have to calculate division in order to play the game, because I really, really want to play that game. It's what it's become with a lot of people is, here's why you or we can't. Often it's why you can't, because they don't want people to play with you. Whereas when we were doing it in the late 70s with my friends, it was how can we? What can we do to make this game work? What can we do so that it plays smoother or that we enjoy it more? You know, we didn't just play it like this is another one. This doesn't really have to do with tabletop. It's the same kind of thing. Uh, there was a game called Star Raiders. It was a video game, and it was very. We didn't have Star Wars the video game yet. At least we didn't own it. I don't even know if it was released yet or whatever. But it looked like an X-wing. It had the little like the crosshairs that came out, like you could turn them on and off, like Luke, you turned off your targeting computer, you know, from the movie and all that. And some of the enemies looked like TIE fighters and stuff like that. And anyway, so we got into that. It wasn't enough just to play that in front of a TV. We made a console. We made a cockpit for it with a windshield. We made this cardboard set for this thing and put the TV and the Atari in there and made it look like a spaceship. We took old used up calculators and made them look like, you know, like the dashboard of the ship. And there was a person sitting next to us, and it took two controllers. So you could have a co-pilot. The co-pilot ran the one controller and you rolled the other, a gunner and a navigator. That was getting into it. Anybody could just flip on the game and play it. We wanted to encapsulate ourselves in the thing. That's immersion. And you can't do immersion if all you're doing is talking about how everything's too difficult and a simulation, and you have to make all these. No, get into it, dude. And that doesn't translate to super high complexity. So, and I think I'm a relic of the past, and more so than even people my own age that always harp about complexity. And that's why sometimes I wonder if I haven't just the whole thing has moved past me, because when I say old school, I mean it. I want to play like it's 1978, and most people that say they want to play old school don't. They might want to talk about when it was 78, but now they always talk about, well, you know, I don't have the time and all that. So I don't know. This game that I've got isn't difficult by any stretch of the imagination, but as far as concepts and learning. But it doesn't embrace that if you do have this stuff that I want to do, you're making a game that's too tedious and too burdensome to play because it's got too many rules or whatever. Because that's just fictitious. So, but I don't know. Maybe it won't appeal to enough people because of that. But you come in with more than a bunch of people, or more than 5 people. You come in with a bunch if you can. You know, as far as a party. Sorry, that was kind of soapboxy.
Yeah, a little bit, but I mean, you're passionate about it, and that's good. And that's what makes for interesting gameplay too, because you're going to take the time with it too. And it all hinges on, you know, what the DM prepares on the game, as far as if you make it so that it's clear, it's easy to keep track of, people know what's going on from moment to moment, that keeps it interesting and flowing, and it enhances immersion. in the game, even if you are having to, keep track of some things. And really, if you think about it, if you are a fighter or an adventurer of some type, you'd be keeping some records of your adventures somewhere along the way. I mean, I think that's kind of journaling is something that a lot of adventurers would do just to,
Well,
people would keep diaries of the past or records of, if you want to get paid for your efforts,
and
you would
and
mark down how many enemies you took out for the cause or whatever if you were.
yeah, it's one of these things where I think the problem with that is if you're, and I know you are old as me, and remember that there was a lot of teachers that were really into outlines and note taking. And you ever have a teacher who goes, "You're going to take notes this way, whether you like it or not,"
Yeah.
and would spend a portion of the class teaching you how to do that? and
Um,
and there a lot of people who didn't do well on tests back then, and maybe now today, I don't know, education's changed, but whatever, it wasn't so much anything that they just weren't good note takers. It's
mhm.
somewhat of a skill to know what to write down and what not to, and writing down everything becomes a chore, and writing down the wrong thing leads to I put a lot of effort into something that didn't yield any positive or effective results. So people go, that sucks, I don't want to do it, and I completely understand why. um,
Oh, can you explain to me? There's a comment in here, Storm. Someone said that AD&D I'd rather play Beck Me. What does that mean exactly?
Back Me is the red box that you bought, that you discussed.
Ah,
Yes,
gotcha. Okay.
yeah, it's an acronym, because that was a series. You bought red box, which was basic. The next one was expert, it was blue.
Uh
Then there
huh.
was companion, which was a turquoise. Then there was master, that was black. And then there was immortals, and it was kind of a, what would you call that color? Light brown, maybe. I'm not good with all those crayon mauve or whatever, but it was kind of a lightish brown color anyway. But that was the levels. But basic had this, from one first level to whatever it was, fourth or whatever, and then basic had from fifth to 12th or something. I'm probably getting the numbers just a little bit off, but it was doling out the rules in little sections. It was the first. I don't know if it was the first, but it was kind of. I remember when it came out, people were like, "That's it, we're screwed." And I love it too. I enjoy that game, but I remember just a lot of people remarking at the tables and at the discussions that this is this is now a mainstream thing being sold in mainstream stores, and it's going to ruin D&D because they will have shareholders trying to appease the masses as opposed to writing games for the underground game players that started the whole thing out. I always remember that. It was great. I loved the artwork and I loved the rules. It's a good system, but um, that's just a little bit of history to it. But it was certainly a lot more approachable and easier to learn than AD&D. It I don't remember as many editorial issues or badly written sentences. I'm sure there were some. It's been a long time since I read through the whole thing, but yeah, that's what Beckme is. It was supposed to be gold. Okay, it didn't really look gold a lot, but it looked, yeah. It kind of had an off light brown, but yeah. So, but yeah, it's a good system. It's different, and that's the other thing. You with TSR, as much as we've been harping on AD&D for all sorts of reasons, you did have that spectrum where you could go to Beck Me if that was it. And I did the same thing. To me, you had to be, even in 78, you had to be real hardcore and be like I was. Just not that there's anything better or superior to it, but you had to be that kind of person, like I said, that wanted to be dipped in, a lot of detail and depth, and have to consume a lot of information in order to play it. Whereas Beck Me, it was it was spoon feeding you, you know, and it was kind of it was like Miller Lite, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's what I reach for when somebody goes, "Yeah, I heard you play those games, and I might want to try." If I handed them AD&D, they'd start looking through that and go, I think I'll pass. But you hand them Beckme and they go, all right, sure, whatever, and you could walk them into the deep end. Start at basic, and I use that analogy. But basic was the shallow end, and you just kept getting deeper and deeper into it as you went. And as we've talked about, that's a marketing ploy that works because it eases people into it. And instead of being like my instructor at computer school said, a lot of this is like trying to drink from a fire hose. We're going to shove a lot of information down your throat in one gulp, and it'll be hard to consume it all. And that's what AD&D was to a lot of people. So
Makes sense. And I think a lot of folks would have never heard about AD&D if it hadn't been for Beckme. They would have never heard about the genre entirely or known it existed. I know I wouldn't have.
Yeah, it would just if it would have just been, oh, that's that thing they talk about on the on the Phil Donahue. But once it was in KB and stuff like that, and you might pass by it, looking for a GI Joe or whatever it was, that did change things, and that's why they did it. They wanted, companies are about success, and that was success. There's a lot of people that insist product placement. There's a lot of people who insist that change did do what they foresaw it did as far as where we're at now, and that's an opinion, and you're welcome to it. But it did break things open, no doubt about it. Marketing and exposure do that. So, but yeah. But that's the other thing. My system is basic. It's not, you're not cannonballing into the deep end. It isn't even, there's going to be advanced rules, but they're coming later. I don't want to put them out in conjunction with a basic because people, then you get that fire hose thing that people are talking about. So first, let's see how many people like it. Let's see if people want to use it. And if they do, and they go, because that's the way all this stuff was. You started out simple and you go, okay, now I get it. It's fun. And now I want more because I've done the basic 3 or 4 times. I've run that small dungeon in the beginning of Beckme more than once. Where's the rest of it? And then you went and you got the rest of it. And you just, it was like you were the character elevating in levels with Beckme. You learned how to play 1 through 4, and then you went to the next. You understand what I'm saying? And
yes.
I'm trying to do the same thing with my stuff.
Well, that makes sense. And plus you can scale it that way because some people, all they ever need is the initial why,
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to go any further than that. I like that. I like the game exactly like that. Or I started at the basic level. I went up to the next level, and then I decided I wanted to go back down again.
Mm-hmm.
Because I like the basic better, or because I'm playing with somebody else who's brand new to it, or
maybe bring little brother to the table this time. So we
right.
had to dial it back for whatever insert whatever scenario, but that just
right.
a funny one because I knew a guy like that. What's he doing here? My mom made me. I can't play unless everybody rolls their eyes, but yeah. Right. It's a good approach, but I like one of the interesting things about the OSRs is the brosser people, whom I'm not a fan of, as I keep repeatedly saying, but there's this other thing they said that I get. And at first I just go, oh, it's coming out of your mouth, so it must not mean anything, but I get it. And they're like, most of these people who are lecturing about this rule book haven't read it since they were 14. And I shut up, you guys are awful. And then I thought about it and I go, you know what though? They're totally right. And it's been a long time since I looked at that book. And now that I've looked at it with a more keen eye than I have in a long time, you start to see the imperfections and the cracks in it that you didn't see before. And it really is something that, I'm ready to just kind of go, yeah, there was a time, but it's not anymore. I heard somebody say that the other day too, a guy about my age, a Canadian fellow. And I go, you're giving up. Don't be. If you're going to be OSR, play old OSR. And now I'm like, no, yeah, I kind of get it because it is kind of a mess. So it'll be. I just. Plus, I'm tired of switching rule books. Every time you play something different, you kind of got to recollect something that you haven't done in a long time, especially when you can't play every. It was different when you played every week, you know,
Right.
because you were young or whatever. But now it's so few and far between, you know. So, um, so that's why using my system, whether it does, I mean, I hope it's successful, of course, but whether it is or not, it'll be my way of doing this. And I hope I can at least get enough people. If it isn't successful, that'll be a damn shame, obviously, for me at least. But even if it isn't, if I can get 4 or 5 people to get on board with playing it, then I'm fine. Then at least I have a place where I can go to play that doesn't require me to, you know, keep all that information locked in my head and have to recall it all the time between all these different game systems. And maybe that's a good reason for you to try it too, because it does everything. It's not about, well, this is another fantasy game or this is another sci-fi retro clone. This thing I made so that it can play anything from heroic fantasy to sci-fi to western. It's not just a role-playing game. You can use the mass battles as a very um, uh, easy to learn, standardized wargaming system that you can go, you know what? My big brother had Panzer Group Guderian in his closet, and he let me have it. And I opened up that book, and man, I don't know. It's kind of a, it's kind of hard. It's kind of like, I don't know if I want to read all that. You get one of those scenarios, and you could just take what I got and open it up and play. And now you can use that game and the pieces that look cool and the map that looks cool and all that stuff and the scenarios, but not have to, crack your head open reading that stereo code of a rule set. To be fair, Panzer Group Guderian was one of the simpler ones that came out from that area, but nonetheless, they all kind of have that reputation for being a little bit of a head cracker. So you get a lot of utility out of it. I think there's a lot of people that might want to take a look at it just because they go, what do you mean it can do all that? There's no way. Well, buy it and find out.
Right.
Anyway.
Sometimes the only way you find out is to try.
Right.
That's why, like I said earlier, I'm only suspicious of people who try to tell me, don't even try that. It's not worth trying.
Right.
Well, really? What does it cost you if I try? If you're right, I'll find out.
Right. Or tell me it's not fun. How do you know?
Right, because my definition of fun could be quite different from yours.
Right, because it doesn't meet the criteria for what I call fun. Well, then it doesn't meet your preference. That doesn't mean it's not going to meet everybody's preference. They might love it. Some people have fun collecting stamps. To me, but there was a lot of people that really enjoyed that and did it for years, and it was very fun for them. As inconceivable as that may be to most people these days, but so it's all a matter of preference. But anyway, I think we've repeated ourselves a couple of times over 2 hours. I think we've probably beat a dead horse. I'm afraid that this wasn't meant to be an FU to anybody, but I do get a little aggravated at the vitriol that comes from simply stating an opinion or something like that. I don't think I alienate a lot of people, but I think some people, they'll listen to you as long as you reaffirm all their opinions. The minute that you have a disagreement on their opinions, they don't want to listen to you anymore. They unfollow you on social media. That's something I noticed too. So, but I'd love it if I could get more people to watch. The last couple of weeks, we've had a lot of participation. This one didn't seem to entice a lot of people into the video, but I think it needed to be said, and I think we covered some interesting ground. What do you think, Magenta? Did I go too hard?
Well, see, for me, Twitter feuds should remain on X, whatever the hell it's called now.
Okay, but to be fair, this is something that has transcended platforms and is going on for years. So this isn't something that's just originated from, X or anything like that, or Twitter or whatever. This
Well,
is
maybe so.
a
I
long
just
time thing. And it really isn't an argument. I simply voiced my opinion. I expressed how I interpreted a couple pages in a rule book. I didn't do so with any animosity. I did joke at the beginning that it was swatting a hornet's nest, because bringing up a lot of these subjects does that no matter what. But
right.
I merely said, this is how I interpret this rule. This is why I don't like it. And the justification is given in the manual as to why it's used under the term note on page 85. And here's why I find that a little bit, irritating. And the replies, some of them were fine, but some of them were amazingly vitriolic for somebody who said something fairly inane. And then came
That's what I mean.
the bots.
Twitter has and that kind of stuff. Tends to be in a particular text only conversations of that nature tend to become something where it's almost as if people forget that there are other people who type the responses. Like the assumption is everybody's a bot, so everybody just ramps up the
Yeah, or they don't care. But
or they
the
don't or they enjoy the idea of someone on the other screen getting
getting
their
upset.
blood pressure up and getting upset at what they're
Right.
saying, and
Well,
that's the reason that they say controversial
right.
stuff. So
Well, yeah, that's true. But bots are pretty easy. Here's the thing about it. People act like it's some spy network that you can't see, but they're fairly identifiable these days. They have a low follower count. They have generally they have and this is can be confirmed by any security website that I was playing. They have a very long set of numbers in their screen name. Often, not always, but most often, the low follower count, low following count, and generally created some years ago with little to no activity in between the generation of the account and the current date. And at least 3 replies fit that criteria.
right.
And it was likely somebody whom wants to continue acting as if they're cordial, but also wanted to express what they really felt through that kind of shrouded mask of alternate account or sock account or something like that. And that kind of behavior is why I don't really put a lot of stock in some of the arguments against my opinion or my perceptions or
When the
what I'm
owner of
saying.
the platform is creating sock puppet accounts, what do you expect the users will
Right.
do?
And it's amazing. Some people have even publicly admitted that they do this. In TTRPG, I heard somebody during a discussion go, and they said, I'll go on there and say stuff under a different name, like it's no big deal. So it's all right. I don't want to really get into that kind of drama too much, but I've decided over the years that remaining mum and the whole, well, don't let them get your goat and just let it pass. Being passive is as much a way to invite more aggressiveness as anything, because if they don't get the rise they want, they'll just turn it up to a higher level until they get the rise they want. So I've determined that calm uh, public exposure is a good way to embarrass somebody. If you show people, look at how this person acts, and granted, you don't have an idea of who specifically this person is, but if you constantly just put this out on blast to the rest of the community, they start seeing that somebody's acting in a way that is, you know kind of silly, and that's probably the best way to get them to stop, or at the very least say, look, the arguments here are just vitriolic trolls and not anything that has any intellectual acumen to it.
Well, to be fair though, you can have like good-minded people who share those same opinions and are not trolls. So I think that that's kind of to my mind, sometimes that kind of trollish behavior is intended just to sow division between people who could otherwise come to a compromise. But,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know, they don't want that to be the possible outcome. They just want to keep the fight going because
Mhm.
negativity is candy to them, I guess.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. It's
And,
it's like candy. That's what
and
they feed on.
I knew some of that would come, and I was willing to just go. I'm just gonna now just ignore it, mute it or whatever. But
Yeah.
really, what I wanted to see is um, as far as Twitter goes, which it doesn't mean that means a lot less to me than it did just a couple of months ago. I was really concerned about my follower account and how I was going to market my product through Twitter, and I had this giant following. That day. Don't take that if you're a follower. Don't take that personally. That doesn't mean I don't care about what you think or I don't want you as a customer. I just realized that all the metrics and all that are complete hooey. You're chasing shadows. Just put out what you want and be done with it.
Half
But
of them might be Ellen.
right. So but I would just wanted to see how much this would affect me because the new algorithm is supposed to sense negativity, and frankly, if anything, I've gotten more reach for bringing up this contentious topic. So just kind of, but it wasn't meant to tweak noses or start fights. I don't like the mechanic. Lots of people don't like specific mechanics, and I like to do it a different way. And I wanted to use it as a springboard to highlight how the contrast between how that game does it, how some other games do it, between how I do it, where DMs are free to give bonus XP based on, hey, I really never expected you to do that with that spell or to take that approach. I'm going to give you some extra XP. That's completely up to the DM to do. But there's also a list of things, uh, that have at least a range of XP points that should be assigned as a guideline. And then of course fulfilling any type of overall uh, mission. If the whole story was about the king who hired you to go find the wizard that got captured by the orcs, and you get the wizard, then you should get some bonus XP for achieving that goal, of course. Something like that. I think that's a much better way than just people searching out every nook and cranny that may have a pile of gold with an orc guarding it and killing it so that they can level up. I
Right.
don't like that kind of play. I don't want to encourage that. So I don't like that
I
system.
wonder, do DMs kind of shoot themselves in the foot with that kind of strategy too? Because, like, so say you've crafted this, and not that anybody really likes railroading. I know how people feel about that, but I'm not really all that opposed to it if it gets you to a cool story that's something more than go find orc, kill, steal. You know what I mean? If it gets me to something that's more like, oh, there's a mystery that I've found out about because I did this, because I followed the clues. Not railroading, but breadcrumbing. I think is what I am thinking of. I'm okay with the breadcrumbs because
Right.
I can choose to follow them. But if you're a DM that is crafting a story with a trail of breadcrumbs to lead to a really cool outcome in your story that you've kind of set up the bones of a story for the players to discover along the way. And all your players want to do is just grab gold
Yeah.
because that's what levels them up.
Or gear. We had people
Or
in
gear, yeah.
Star Wars that all they wanted was that new set of armor or that one blaster they heard about. And they travel all over the galaxy just to find some scenario or find some planet where they get that stuff. They didn't care about anything that was going on other than getting more cool weaponry and gear. And to what end? If you're not fighting for a cause or don't want to be part of a cause or part of a fight, then what are you doing? You're just out there to gather wealth for the sake of it in order to become a more powerful fighter for what? Yourself? For what is your motivation? It doesn't make any sense. And that's a sandbox, and you're welcome to play that way. And if everybody's enjoying it, then by all means enjoy it. But I think that often what happens is people just get tired they get bored even with what they think isn't boring, because how many times can you just find somebody to shoot to take to loot their armor? That's an MMO. Why do that it, over a period of 3 hours in a turn-based or an RPG tabletop simulation, when you could get a lot more of that done and have it be more engaging if you went and played, Lotro or uh, Knights of the Old Republic or something like that. It doesn't seem to me that tabletop is the genre for the bonk monster take gold, rinse, repeat type of formula. That's why I
Yeah.
tell a lot of those people, I think you're looking for a video game, because I think it would be more fulfilling to do it in a video game, just from my experience. But yeah, I can see what you're saying.
Unless you've got, like myself, I am not as, I mean, I do play video games, but my fingers are not as fast as they used to be. My
Yeah.
coordination, I mean, you get to a certain age where your tendons are stiffer than they were when you were younger. Your
Hmm.
reaction time slowed down, and the games are made for people who are younger who have
Hmm.
faster abilities on all those scores. So if you want to enjoy the type of game where you're playing and you're challenging yourself, but you can't do the speed, well, you could do the quick thinking though, maybe. You
Right.
can make the right decisions. You could.
Hmm.
So I can see why, some people might still be attracted to that, even though, a video game, like you say, is really kind of more conducive to what you're talking about playing.
Yeah, I guess so. There's all they don't like being railroaded,
Yeah,
and no matter what you do with a video game, there's a railroad.
that's true.
Even
Yeah.
Knights of the Old Republic, you can decide where you want to go, but you have to unlock a lot of those places. It's not, here's an entire galaxy, you can go anywhere you want. You have to do things in order to unlock other deals. In Lotro, you have to pay to go to certain places. And even if you could get to certain places, you won't last 10 seconds because their level is higher than you by so much that all they have to do is flick you in the head to kill you. So
Right.
they all have that leash around you no matter what. In a D&D game, you don't have to do it. But the thing is for all the times that people complain that these games take too long, you have now turned the speed dial way down, to a degree. But here's the funny thing. Another thing, this is getting into a different topic a little bit, but here's the thing. If you go and look, Steam tells you how long you've been playing.
Yeah.
We're playing Baldur's Gate. If the thing holds together and keeps our saves, because it's got a problem with saves not working,
Yeah.
but if the saves stick together and we play that whole thing, how many hours do you think it's going to take to finish that whole game?
Oh, probably. Oh, geez. 300?
Right. It's a I guess you could call it campaign, but have you saved any time with the computer doing the calculations for you? It'd be neat to have somebody that had the presence of mind and willingness to make the contrast. Maybe we should. We've already played 2 campaigns and not kept. We keep strict time, or I do, inside the game, but just notating. Okay, we played for 3 hours and 45 minutes tonight. I should start doing that with one of these games, and then do it comparative to
Right.
how long it took to complete Baldur's Gate, and you'll see that your video game isn't saving you any time, but you may be much more engaged by a video game for a variety of reasons, and that's okay.
It's the
But
visual. It's
it's the
moving.
visual, right? It's the interactivity that you don't get, and the instant interactivity that you don't get with a tabletop game, and that's fine. And when I tell people, hey, maybe you'd be more interested in a video game, it's not, hey, you're stupid, or or any of that stuff. It's I'm looking for beans. They're on aisle 5. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
And and um uh and and that's okay too. I mean, it's not, but I think there's a lot of people that that look at video games in a different light. And if they admit, like, there's this whole movement now that losers that never get, they're trying to make video gamers the nerds that they used to be. For a while, it
Mhm.
was like the whole transition from nerd to geek. Like
Right.
a nerd was a pimple faced loser, but a geek is just some techno jive dude, you know? And there seems to be this movement for whatever reason that wants to brand them as the people that should be shoved in lockers and are disengaging with the world or something like that. And and I think that it's affecting some people where they think that they're showing themselves as being more open-minded and more intellectual if they're playing these complicated elf games that are on the table versus the simple loser who's just clicking on a mouse and wasting his life away staring at a screen. But when it really comes down to it, they look at what effort is required in order to play that elf game and they go, I don't really want to, too much math or whatever. And they're over there flipping on the video game whenever they can get away with it. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. This isn't some
I
cut
like
down to bring
both.
that up.
I'll be honest. I like both. I like a video game for the instant gratification, but sitting in the same position, staring at a screen, there is a level of frustration that breeds sometimes.
Yeah. It's
That
it
I need something where, and it's a lonely kind of thing. It really
that's right.
is.
That's right. It was for a while. It seemed like I was in the same boat where I was just like, I've had people kind of suck and right now, and so I kind of like to be, this is some shelter, and I can kind of tune out from people sucking, and then all of a sudden I go, you know what, I kind of miss people, and the other thing with me and computers is I no longer have the money to keep up. It's become a cash flow that I can't keep up with to maintain your technical specs and all that. I
Right.
don't like, I mean, I use Steam because they've cornered the market in such a way that that's what you're going to use or you're not going to use anything. That doesn't mean I like it. I don't like that business model at all. So that's what that cooled me on games for a long time. They rarely work right. Some people say, I don't understand why you say that. I don't have the kind of problems you do. But I read the internet when I have a problem and I see how many other people are having that same problem. They're quirky. There's a lot of technical issues a lot of the time. And I don't have that with a tabletop game. On the flip side, there's a lot of people that always are complaining about tabletop games being tedious and boring to play or take too long and they don't have the time. And then something really kick ass shows up. Here's a new BattleTech Mech Warrior, and I played that religiously up to number 4 when the money started to go run out, and I didn't have enough money for a computer to play 5. But every time one comes out, I go, "Oh yeah, that's a juicy steak, baby! I'd love to play that. I remember how fun it was." And I go, "Oh, and then I kind of get it. Or maybe I'm lucky enough, somebody like yourself gifts me something, and now I can spend some time on it, and I'm fun with it for a while. Then I'm going, well, that's right. I see why people prefer video games until the thing starts acting all shitty and broken, and I hit some technical wall where it won't save right, or I don't have the right drivers, or the pixel shader model's wrong, and I have to spend $300 on a video card to make my $50 game. And then I go to myself, now I remember why I stopped playing these games. This sucks. Where's my tabletop? And I just keep bouncing
Right.
back and forth.
Well, and there's another thing too. Um, I have seen it, and this is more with the console games. I will say, I don't know that I've seen it as much with the PC games, unless it's a console type game being played over PC. But I have seen it with my grandkids. They're playing the console type games, and I can see like they're excited when they start playing, and then they start having trouble getting past the level. They're in a difficult level, and these things are designed, they're set up to do the same thing that once upon a time they did to rats back in the day to
Yeah,
determine,
the DLC
what
thing, I get it. Yeah,
makes people uh, neurotic, right? If you want to drive a rat crazy, you give it a button that sometimes gives it a reward and sometimes shocks the hell out of it. And then that rat will be neurotic and it will continue to press the lever
yeah,
because sometimes it gets a reward. Now, if you give a rat, on the other hand, a lever that always shocks him, they'll stop pressing it
use.
immediately.
Sure.
Yeah,
Right.
they're not even tempted. And if you give a rat a lever that always gives a reward, they'll go up when they want the reward and they'll leave it alone when they don't.
Yeah.
And both of those instances, the rat does what normal rats do in their life.
Right.
But the rat that sometimes gets the reward and sometimes doesn't, or that has to push that button 500 times to get a reward, will
Now
drive itself crazy till
the
its little
72-year-old
paws
lady
fall
at the
off.
slot machine that just keeps pulling. Yeah.
Exactly. It's the
Yep.
and they've done these studies. I would like to think that they did these studies to kind of discover something about human nature so that we could make ourselves alleviate stress or anxiety but what I think suspect that they really did it for is to determine how to control people better. That's what I think. Because what I've seen since then is every cell phone game that's been produced, every video game that's been produced has that same mechanism
Yeah.
of make it tough. It's just out of reach, and you gotta play. I was playing one, this was the Hogwarts Legacy, because I like Hogwarts, it's a fun little thing, and I'm playing it, and there's this level where it's really tough, and I was on the phone actually discussing the next show with you when this happened, um, some time ago. We were talking about that, and I'm like trying to get through this level, and you're just talking to me in the background. You're not possibly doing anything to cause me to fail, but in my mind, I was getting angry at you. I was
Yeah.
like, God, you made me lose. You
Yeah.
didn't. You didn't. There's no way you could have made me lose. The game made me lose. I was designed to lose. And I saw it with my grandkids too. They would play these games and they would just get so, I got to get past this level. This thing, it's killing me. And the frustration level. And the next thing you know, some controllers throwing, going from one kid's head at the other kid's head. And you're like, hey, no throwing. Don't hurt your kid. Don't hit your brother. What are you doing? Why he made me lose? No, he didn't. The game made you lose, and the game made you angry, and the game made you not have fun with your family members. You're in the same room with them. You should be spending time building positive memories. Instead, you're hating on each other because he made you lose. But he didn't. He didn't make you do anything. It was the game was designed to make it difficult to win and make you angrier and angrier. And part of that is because when you do finally win, boy, does that make the reward from winning just phew. It's like if the reward that rat was getting was like cocaine or something, you're
Right.
like, yeah. And it makes them drive
Right.
and keep going to get it more and more. And it leads to addiction to these games. Um,
Yeah. Whereas I
which
used to.
I'm not trying to preach at anybody. It's just an observation that I've
Right.
made that I've
Right.
seen.
And I used
And
to be.
that's why I think there's still a role for tabletop type games,
Sure.
games where you're actually, especially cooperative games, where you're playing cooperatively with other
On
players,
people. Yeah.
where your human to human interactions are positive
Yes.
and rewarding instead of a distraction to the real dopamine reward that you get from finally beating that boss level that was so
Yeah.
damn hard.
Right. Right. The PC, computers and video games were fun, and I loved arcade games. But when I when I started, really getting into tabletop war games, I was really into them for a long time. But when I got enough money where I could have a 24 by 12-foot table and a regiment of tanks, and I was really into it because I could afford some good miniatures and bigger armies and stuff. And then the PC became the well, my buddies can't play today because they have basketball practice, or they've gone to their grandma's house for the weekend with their mom. So it was the fallback time killer for the I would turn a computer off to go downstairs and play a tabletop game. Now I don't know that there's a lot of people that are like that. It was kind of, but the other thing about video games is it was a sense of accomplishment that didn't drive you nuts because you weren't putting, a lot of money into it. The levels were harder and harder, sure, and you felt great when you beat them, but there wasn't well, you can't win unless you buy this for $5. in
No,
the
but
middle of
you
the
know what?
game, you know?
Those original, because I remember those original arcade style games, Pac-Man, Dig Dug, all of those kinds
Well,
of
they got
games.
smart when they started adding the continue for another quarter, sure. Is that what you
Well,
mean?
no, that's not what I mean.
Oh,
Uh, those games are unwinnable. When you play one of those games, you are going to lose. I noticed this one. I got some of these old retro games, and Pac-Man was one of them. I got one of those cheap, knockoff ones that comes with like a bunch loaded on, and I let my grandson play them. Now he's 4 years old. He's autistic, so he has some emotional control issues, and especially when he loses. It didn't take me but like half an hour of him playing, and I conveniently lost that thing after this one session because I realized he was getting frustrated every time he would lose, and I'm like, "Honey, you're always going to lose those games." Well,
yeah, they were.
but I want to win, but it's impossible to win. The
Yeah.
most that you can do is rack up a high score, but they never let you win the game. It's
Okay.
Pac-Man's always going to get eaten by the ghosts. It's just winning means that you staved that off longer than somebody else did. You
Okay.
got a
Well, here's
higher score.
okay.
But he didn't he's too young at 4, he was way
I
too young to
understand.
understand it.
I understand. But here's the thing. Because I'm a retro aficionado, that's I understand what you're saying, and your point still stands. And this is kind of an actually type of thing, but actually there is an end.
Actually,
Uh,
you mean?
Yes, yes. Uh, I
Okay.
always say it that way when you do the nerd meme, but they're
Yes.
at. I walked up to a Pac-Man machine ready to play, and the screen was all wonky and screwed up, and I thought it was broken. I said, "Ah, it's out of order. Look at that. The screen's not working right. I'm not going to put my quarter in there." It turns out, as I learned a little bit later after that occurred, is that there actually was a limit. It would hit a certain. It could only go so high with levels, and somebody it's a rarity, an extreme rarity, but somebody actually had gotten to that level, and it caused the machine to go berserk and render the screen improperly. You can read about it, Pac-Man and the maximum level and all that stuff. There was an end to the game, but that's very rare. And your point
For
still
for
stands. I understand what you're saying.
99.99999%
Absolutely,
of people, that was,
absolutely. I'm
and
just
for 100% of 4-year-olds, you're never getting to
nerds
that.
always right. You're right. Nerds always have to do, but technically, but
Yeah.
but yeah, it's true. But that's the thing. Here's the other thing. When it comes to TTRPG, I'm fine with that. I love the idea of a living world.
Yeah.
I would play that in a heartbeat over any campaign, any one-off. I don't want the thing to end. I want to be in a paracosm. That's why the name of my game system is Paracosmic Conversions. I want to be in a world here, like this is what I want. Have you ever watched a a TV show that you love so much that when it was over, you missed it,
Yeah,
and you
you
really
wished
wish
it
you could
was,
go
why
back
did it
that
have to
world?
end? Yes, yes, I
I
have.
want to go
Yeah.
back to. Uh, I'm so old I can't remember where I want to go back. So I can't remember. But the one where all the inventors. It was on Sci-Fi. Um,
The Inventors.
uh,
Quantum Leap?
no, no,
Sliders?
no. Remember the government had them all working there, and they were all quirky inventors, and they had them in that. Jeez.
I'm drawing a blank. I
Yeah, I'll
probably,
get there.
yeah. I have probably would remember it if you gave me the right clue, but I don't, it's not drawing any. I'm drawing a
Something
blank right now.
Bill.
Huh?
Ah,
Oh, I know what you're Eureka.
Eureka. And
Yes.
when Eureka was over, I missed all the characters and I missed that little town and I wanted more. I want more. I want
Yeah.
to I got comforted and enjoyed the weekly we're going to that little city. to
Yeah.
see what's going on with all those people. And that's what and there's other ones like it, but that was, to me, as burned out as my old ass is that I couldn't remember the title of it, it was one of the greatest TV shows I ever watched. It had the right mix of funny, feel good, and tension and sci-fi. I just, it
Right.
wasn't. I like a dark, gritty thing as much as anybody, but that was a period of life where I just wanted to go to somewhere that generally I felt good about. It did not every episode was, there was, everybody goes through drama. That's part of storytelling. But anyway, that's what I want with a role playing game. You can go on your campaigns. Things are going to change. It's going to evolve like every other world, but I don't want it to be a close ended thing. I want to be able to say, well, I had to go take a job in Norfolk for 2 years, but now that I have more time on my hands, I'm going back and that damn thing's still rolling with
Hmm.
other people, and we can go do the dungeon crawl that some people think is so great. We can go on the epic campaign. We can do a hex crawl. We can do a bronze style western marches. I know some of these things you're like, what the hell are you talking about? But they're just different variants of this kind of the same game or whatever. But it's just, there's something always going on, and you can jump back in and jump out as you please. To me, that's the ultimate achievement. That's the ultimate RPG, and that's what I want to play on a tabletop. Because anybody can go do, like, especially if you can do it with more than a handful of people.
Right.
If you can get people from all over to do it when they want and they can go do their style without having to search around. You can go play your theater kid version or whatever it is, because there's enough room in this thing. But the neat deal is it's all tied in with everything else in its own way. And there's always somebody spinning that globe, so to speak, because you have enough DMs to run something. It
Right.
can be done, but it'll never get done because it's one of these things that gets stomped on and blown off and ignored, because we go right back to all the stuff that started out this conversation: complexity and tedium and in the weeds, and that's too much to do and you'd never get it done. It's an unplayable monster and blah, blah, blah. But I've been through that part before. I've gone and watched living worlds get played across the country with hundreds of people by mail and telephone when a computer wasn't something that you could pick up and move around barely. And
Right.
the idea of
And
a
now you
mobile,
got cell phones, people. It should be easier.
right,
I mean,
right,
really,
can be done.
when we've played the games, the ODD games, all we really needed was Discord to do it.
Right, right.
I mean, if you want to get fancy with it, you want to show 'em the maps and you want to get more visual and you want to have more, um, you can always enhance it with extras like that, um, you know, 3D tabletop, that kind of thing. But it's not technically necessary. So you could just play it through your phone on Discord on a group chat, and everybody could,
If
you know.
I see somebody has bailed out, unfortunately, as soon as I mention living world, somebody bails out. I don't know if that has any coincidence or
Oh,
not.
you
I hope
can't
it.
always read into that.
Well, okay, but
Some people lose
uh,
connection. Sometimes
well,
it's, it
here's
is
all
12:15 in
right.
the morning.
Fair
So
enough, but fair enough. But if you're still here and you're still watching, and you're going, "What's this old man talking about?" That's crazy talk, and you don't remember the old times like I'm talking about. Go to archive. If you so feel, you could really be enlightened if you go to archive.org and look at Polyhydron magazine, circa 84, 85, 86, somewhere in there, if I remember right. And if you look at that, you'll see it talking about the living campaigns. And it was done through a magazine sent through the mail. It was done through letters sent through the mail. A few things were done over the phone, and it was run by half a dozen people. I met the lady. I talked to her. It was through the RPGA, the one that headed it, and we talked about some of the logistical issues. And sometimes she felt a little haggard because some people were, demanding. You know how gamers can get. They're not always them and man. Don't take this the wrong way, but anyway, she says, I'm working with a staff of 6 people, and we're coordinating across the country, including two or three major conventions and a handful of small conventions. There wasn't a computer in sight. There wasn't
Yeah.
a computer on her desk. There was nothing. Now, did computers exist? Sure. Did she maybe keep a database on an old Macintosh or whatever? Maybe, but it was done through the snail mail, and it was done well enough to coordinate hundreds of subscribers and players. Imagine what you could do with people that dropped that narrow-minded, everything is too hard to play if it's got any detail, and utilized the internet for what it was meant for: mass coordination and communication. You could have an epic living campaign.
Speaking of epic, that's one of my favorite musicals. I don't know if anybody else has ever heard of it, but just a shameless plug for the guy who wrote it, because I think he is. It's wrapped up now. I took quite a while. It was all done over the internet. That's another example of how you can build something that way. Not to say that it was all thanks to that. I mean, the guy's got excellent musical ability and singer songwriter, and his content was pretty cool. Um, because it was all about it's about the Odyssey, so it was good classic storytelling too, but he put it all to music, and did it all on TikTok. Got a following there, started getting people on his Discord, and he self promoted. He actually, that's where he got all his singers from. Really pretty impressive. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to go on a tangent like that, but just impressed. It's the guy's name is Jorge Rivera Herons, who did it, and I'm just impressed with it. And I don't know if anyone else has ever heard of it. If you haven't, check it out. Dude's pretty cool, and the
So
music is pretty well.
yeah,
Storm like the first step. I
that
played
was
the
great.
first one. Yeah, huh?
I liked it. Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, we've we've been rolling for 3 hours and 15 minutes.
Whoa, we
Yeah,
have.
if there's still some people watching, if you've got anything you want to say, criticisms, questions, whatever it is, anybody, you know, feel free to type it in the chat, whatever. I'll be happy to Q&A about my system or anything that's been talked about today. If you sat through this entire thing, you're
Hats
true.
off to you. Thank
You're
you for the
just,
support.
and,
And
and,
please, if you
thank you
enjoy the
though.
content, would like to please request that you like, share, and subscribe. That does help us out. We're a new channel, relatively, um, just trying to get a foothold out there. So if you know anybody else who likes content like this that you want to share this with, please do. And hit all the buttons. You know
And
the
we
drill.
and look at what we're doing. Not everything is this. This was kind of a unique off the cuff thing, and so you're learning. And sometimes when you don't know what you kind of got to figure out what the right thing to do is. I'm happy with what I'm doing right now. I'm happy with the stream. I'm happy talking to people, but sometimes, we'll find a little niche. One of the things is that's coming up. If you're listening, if you're out there, if you're interested, the more the merrier. Um, there can't be too many. Is people that want to get involved with collaborative world building.
Yes.
That's the thing we're going to do. And we did about a week and a half's worth of it in total, if I remember right.
Yep.
5 or 6 episodes, and we want to get back to it. And we want the more people that are positively contributing, the better. And we're going to make a world. We've already made part of it. We're going to flesh it out, and then we encourage everybody who participated to come in and play in the system, in the world with the paracosmic convergence system.
That would be awesome. And you know what I would love to see us do on the next episode, because we've got a lot of the world created. But one of the things that makes a world really vibrant and living in these types of situations is characters and non player characters, characters in the game itself, including monsters, including bad guys, all of that kind of stuff. But would love to have everybody participate in building those characters up. And you can, roll up your own character. We'll go through like the character creation steps and do it en masse with everybody, watching live, participating. You can always type in the comments. We can walk you through the steps and do it one person at a time. We can invite people up to. I did not mention it at the beginning, and I do apologize at the beginning of the stream here that I didn't do the usual invite in this case, but we always can bring people up to the mic or on video if you're comfortable with that. Some people are, some people aren't. Whatever is to your taste, just let us know, and you can certainly come in and participate too. The more people involved in the discussion, the better as well. So please feel free to join us and participate, and we'll get back to that world building. I really enjoyed doing that when we the few episodes that we did, and I'd love to get back to that.
Yeah, we'll definitely be doing that as soon as possible. And if it goes well and we get, I mean, it's fun just for us to do, but I don't know if it, I mean, what the measure of success is to get other people involved.
Right.
As far as I see it. So if it goes well and people like it, it will quickly turn into a series where we'll go into sci-fi and horror and other genres to make other worlds that can be, that's what I'd like to do with it. But if no one's into it and no one's watching, I mean, so right.
Well, obviously, I mean, getting participation and views is an important part of this whole project. So please, if you do want to.
I feel that there's no reason not to be forthcoming with a viewership. First and foremost, we like people, and we're both in particular personal situations where face-to-face meetings are rare and impractical. So the social element is great. We'd love to have a community of people who they don't have to think like us, but want to play like us because we want to play games and we want to be friendly and have fun. But there's no point in not saying that there isn't, just like everybody else that opens up a YouTube, you kind of want to have more people like and subscribe and view, because then you can you have the possibility of seeing more people and therefore meeting more new people and having more friends and more participants. So is it all about the clicks here? No. Is that element there? Yes. I don't feel that I shouldn't not be forthcoming with people on that issue, but mostly we want people to be involved because more imaginations make better worlds and more vibrant and more variety in the world than just the two of us can come up with on our own.
Oh, absolutely. That makes perfect sense. So, so if you are so motivated, please do like, share, subscribe, comments, give us a thumbs up. We would really appreciate that. And, thank you for your support, for sticking with us till, it's almost 12:30 at night. So you guys are all troopers, and really appreciate it. And I hope you have a wonderful evening. And until next time, happy gaming.
Have a good night, folks. Thanks for stopping by.